our maintenance, park development, or financial resources for parks at the same rate as our developed park acreage has grown. But we'll be looking into that as part of this plan. Some of you know that the 1999 plan, along with the $9 million parks bond, state grants, and SDCs, all of that together gave us the Benda River Park, Chagouin Farms, the J. Pearson Park, Thompson Park, West Hills Park, Discovery Meadows, Riverside Dog Park, and several segments of our West Side linear path. So when we think about how we see planning actually come to fruition on the ground, think about the parks that we have developed since 1999. Having updated community-driven plans allows us to be more competitive for grants. It will allow us to be even more transparent about funding needs and have a standardized capital improvement plan that gets regularly updated. So the last time we had this conversation with the community, it was over 20 years ago. Our population was just over 24,000. Dog parks, pump tracks, they weren't even really things in cities, in most cities, and certainly many aspects of recreation, land stewardship, our demographics, our community needs and wants have evolved in the last 20 years. A master plan gives us guidance for how we steward and maintain what we have, how we use and program spaces, and where and how we will develop future parks. So there's several things we're looking forward to out of this plan, including a fresh look at equity and access to parks, a new format for capital improvement plans, an updated SDC methodology and funding plan, and most importantly, our community's voice and vision for the next 20 years. Through the core services lens, it's interesting to think about the role of parks in our city. Neighborhood parks, the ones that residents can walk to, and the role they serve in communities are one of the lowest barrier touch points between a city and its residents. What was one of the safe things many of us did when the pandemic first started? We went outside. I know in Mcminnville we went to parks because we got a lot more calls about what was happening in our parks and where different amenities were. It was great, and that kind of moment in time just adds to the evolution of the role parks play in our community. So the questions we'll be asking are things like, how do we want to design and use our parks and open spaces to define our community's quality of life and character? So that's a little bit of a look back in history, and now we're going to officially kick off this plan by looking forward. So tonight is really exciting. I'm pleased to introduce our project manager, John Phoenix from MIG, and he's on Zoom. Hi, John.
Good evening, everyone.
He'll be chipping in here after I'm done with the intro. We awarded this contract back in April. MIG was selected through a competitive process, and they were unanimously chosen by a selection committee. MIG has experience in Mcminnville. They actually did our 1999 Parks Master Plan, and they were also a part of the Phase 1 Facilities Master Plan. That's what we now call the MACPAC Plan. So for this project, we want to build on the success and vision of the 1999 plan and design a roadmap for the next 20 years of park development, programming, and maintenance to create a modern park system based on sufficient funding and grounded in equity. Tonight is the very first meeting and discussion about this process. We'll also be working with an internal staff team, cross-departmentally, so that we have a lot of players at the table. We'll be working with the Planning Commission, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and of course we'll be coming back to you, and our community will play a huge role in this process. So John will talk more about the robust and inclusive engagement plan that we'll work on, but we just know it's a very important part of this process, and that the DEIAC is going to serve in the role of Parks Master Plan Advisory Committee. Late today, I emailed you 4 questions that John is going to talk with you about. If you didn't have a chance to check your email, there's a paper copy at everybody's seat here, or it's on your email. This is truly a work session. We just want to have an informal conversation, get the council's voice into the room on this project, and get excited about this planning project. So if you think about our parks, think about which one is your favorite and why. If you think about cities you visited, what role did parks play in your experience there? What are your favorite cities known for? What is Mcminnville known for? And what do we want to be known for related to our outdoor spaces? So kicking this off, I'm going to turn it over to John, and he's going to walk through the process and give you an update on how they're going to manage this project for us. So take it away, John.
All right, thank you, Susan. Can everyone hear me okay? I can see myself on screen, so I think you can see me. Great. Well, everyone, thank you, Susan, for the introduction. That was awesome. council members, mayor, thank you for having me. My name is John Phoenix. I'm a principal with MIG. We're a consulting firm helping City of Mcminnville with this exciting project. And as Susan alluded to, this is really an incredible period in history for Mcminnville. This is honestly once every 20 years or so. Can the city really take a holistic look at parks, recreation, open space, involve the entire community in doing that, and set priorities to set the stage for what comes next? So I'm super thrilled to be here tonight. Let me share my screen and we can start the presentation. Okay, so tonight I wanted to provide some highlights about our process, give you some more details about what exactly we'll be doing over the next 14 months or so. As Susan mentioned, we're just getting started. This is the very first meeting to kick everything off. So that's great timing to dive into questions that you have of me and of the process. What are we going to be doing? What are some things that you'd like to see take place? So I want to talk about the process, but more importantly, as Susan mentioned, the questions that were sent to you earlier today, we want to get to some of those opportunities to talk about as we get started. So first, a little bit about us. Who is the MIG team? As Susan mentioned, parks and recreation are our core service. As we've seen with the pandemic across the country, the first thing folks did when they were stuck at home was, geez, I've got to get out. I got to go outside. I've got to do something to blow off some steam. We know parks are really special, and they are also a key part of how we see communities. If you think about places you've been, parks, recreation, open spaces, they're typically the first thing that come to mind. So we know how important that is. And this is a unique process to look through that. So we bring a pretty unique team to this effort to help the city with this process: planners, landscape designers, communication experts, public involvement specialists. We have all of those on that team. And that's really what we all have to bring throughout this process. We also have on the team CAI, Community Attributes. They will be leading the SDC's update. And then we have Talitha Consults, who will be helping with the equitable outreach component. And that involves a couple of specific tasks that I want to mention tonight. So some key outcomes of this process. What can you expect? What are we aiming to achieve? Well, the first is taking the 1999 plan as a solid foundation. We know how successful that was, a successful bond measure, increase in parks, all sorts of great recommendations that came out of that. So we're going to build on that plan, as well as a lot of other plan processes that the city is undertaking. We'll be looking at the inventory, looking at existing conditions. Our landscape architecture team will be looking at park conditions. Some parks have capacity for more. Some parks need more help than others, and that's what we're going to be understanding. We'll be looking at community needs and priorities, and we have a pretty incredible comprehensive process and number of ideas that we'll be bringing on how we do that. It's a very diverse community, and we want to make sure we're hearing from everyone. Ultimately, all of that will take us to a vision. What do we want to see? What do we want to become into the next 10, 20 years? It's a big picture vision, but it's also an actionable plan. We know we need very specific direction. We know we need the details to implement the plan. And there's some challenges to address. Times have changed over the last 20 years. Music probably more so than all, as you said, Susan. But in all honesty, a lot of growth has taken place. Susan mentioned the increase in parks. How are we going to pay for these? If we find out we need more, if there's interest in adding more to parks, we need to make sure we have a way to maintain and operate all of those facilities. So we need to balance growth and character. We're also addressing social and environmental change. And this goes obviously beyond just parks and rec. It goes through every aspect of the city and the community. So in particular, climate change, wildfires, management of open spaces, park maintenance. I mean, these are all real things that are happening that we need to consider as we look at parks, both in the condition assessment and we look at potential recommendations for the future. A key part of this process will also help identify what are the priorities. Everybody's got an idea or a need of something they'd like to see, but we'll have to figure out, where do we focus first? What's most important? Where do we need to prioritize? And then building partner support and consensus. Mcminnville has a ton of great partners that are active in parks and recreation, community events, programs, educational opportunities. So we'll be bringing them into this process as well, including opportunities to look out for new partners to help support the plan and its adoption. So I'll dive a little bit more into the details. What exactly are we doing? This graphic shows, start to finish, the 4-step process that we'll be doing over the next 14 months or so. So starting things off this summer, we're just getting started, as we mentioned. We'll be putting together a strategy for how we involve the community. We have lots of tools and ideas that we're bringing, but we really don't know how exactly that'll take place until we start talking with staff, with you all tonight, and with the community. We'll look at parks, we'll inventory everything, do all the base mapping, and then we'll get into the needs assessment, starting to poll community members, involving stakeholders. We've got Talitha Consults on our team to help with in-depth interviews, focus group meetings, and a lot of mapping. At this second step, we'll also be doing the STC analysis to help with the methodology update that'll be taking place further down the road, likely more in the spring and summer. Then we get into winter, we'll start getting more into the recommendations, goals, objectives, and then have an opportunity to involve the community in a town hall workshop to start looking at priorities and potential trade-offs. And then that brings us to wrap things up and draft the plan. This will be happening in spring, summer of next year. We'll have several different drafts and opportunities to meet with you all at the council level, planning commission, and other folks that will be involved in informing plan development. The bottom of the screen, just a note here that we have planning commission meeting, city council meeting at each step of the process. Multiple meetings kind of towards the end once we get through the review and adoption process. And then, as Susan mentioned, a really unique aspect of this project is involving the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, who will also be meeting during each step to advise us on plan progress, how we're doing with community outreach, things we're hearing, and improving next steps as we get towards the draft plan. So a unique thing about this process is how we're hearing from the community and what we're doing to make sure we're doing that. Parks and Recreation touches everyone in the community, and so we want to make sure we're hearing from everyone, underrepresented communities, folks that are already engaged. We want to make sure we're involving all of those folks. So we do that through a number of different ways, both online, like we're doing tonight, in person, if anybody can remember the way that used to work. So we'll have a number of different ways we do that. But the first and foremost is listening. We believe in active listening. A couple of ways we do that is graphic recording. This example shown on the left side of the screen. We do this in every meeting we have where we're making sure we're listening, recording notes, and starting to brainstorm, starting to think of new ideas. This process will be approachable. We'll have a project website. We'll have all the information that comes out of the project draft materials. Those will all be placed on the website and pushed out to the community for review. So we want to make sure it's accessible, regardless of if you're able to make a meeting, if you're just online, if you're not at either, if you're just at a soccer game. We want to make sure we're going out to the community to listen. And we do that through an equitable approach. Equity is at the center of this process. We want to go where people are. We know that it's really tough to get people to show up to meetings, and that's not at all what we're expecting. So we have a couple of ways of doing that. First and foremost is making sure we're doing this in the same language. We know there are a lot of Spanish speakers in Mcminnville, so we propose our outreach in English and Spanish. So community surveys, community meetings, we want to make sure that's taking place in a way that's easy to understand and done in a way that's approachable and welcoming. We'll also be doing mapping analysis of demographics throughout the city. So the map on the right is a good example of that. We take different demographic characteristics to help us understand where are some underserved areas of the city. each neighborhood's different, each corner of the city is a little different, and we need to understand that both through in-person dialogue and through analysis. And we want to envision the future. As we said, this is a really important opportunity for the city. It's an opportunity to think big. We want to think big picture. Where do we want to become? What's working? What needs to change? What are some things that we'd like to see? So I know we asked some questions of you tonight. I'll get to that in just a second, but I wanted to just kind of get the creative juices flowing, start thinking about some of these neat things that you've seen out there that may already exist in Mcminnville, but some of the things that you think work really well, or some things that you think are just so cool, they could happen here. Why not? So some things to get us thinking along those lines. Streets, we're seeing a lot of trends in rethinking streets. I know that Mcminnville has been doing that, but why not reuse streets for public space, for events, especially during what we learned over the last 2 years. Bringing nature into the city. One of my favorite examples is the bottom center photo. This is a program in Chicago, very urban city, of course. But this is an urban campers program that takes kids age 9 to 12, brings them out in their local park and lets them have fun, lets them be out in nature and camp. We can also think about how we use infrastructure. We know that sustainability is important. We know that climate change is inevitable. So what are some things that Mcminnville can do, and how do we address that in this plan? This image on the bottom right, this is a play area and park in Seattle, and it uses stormwater, recycled, of course, and treated to recirculate for use in a spray park that's featured at the center of the park. So we call it smart infrastructure, but lots of opportunities out there. A lot of these are just examples, but just some things to get us thinking along those lines. And then lastly, at the end of the day, we know we need this plan to be supported. We know we need partners to come together, the larger community, council, of course. We know that it's important to bring everyone together in this process. So we'll be linking community needs with city policies, technical analysis, to build a plan that's both visionary and actionable. Because at the end of the day, we know that there are a lot of trade-offs. There are costs to consider, there's long-term maintenance to consider. And so we'll be uncovering along the way what matters and how do we get to that at the end through the plan and its development. So with that, I do want to get to the questions, and feel free if you want to go back and ask anything about the process or anything I've shown so far. But the first question I'd like to ask of you all: what are some of the big issues facing Mcminnville today? And then kind of thinking about now and into the future, what are you seeing as some of the things that maybe aren't going away? Maybe they're going to increase next 5 or 10 years or so. But again, a long-term plan. What do you think are some of the big issues that we'll be seeing?
Thank you. I'll tee us up here, and then we'll just go down the dais. I'm going to just take the liberty of going first right now with your question, and I think some of the big issues that I hear about from the community that we need to be keeping in mind are, of course, safety, and also accessibility. And when we're talking about accessibility, I think that falls at a number of different levels. That's referencing both people's ability to access parks regarding their physical ability or the different levels of physical ability, and mental and emotional ability as well. But then that also ties in with economics, which you mentioned, and I like to think about where we're building our parks and how we're investing our dollars throughout the community to make sure that we are trying to give equal access to our parks to different areas of the city. When we're talking about that safety, I'd like to think that some of our thoughts are going into our amenities that are in our parks, right? So our restrooms, how do we make those safer? How do we leave them open? How are those restrooms readily available year-round for our citizens, housed and unhoused alike, without them also becoming unsafe areas? how do we maintain those, right? I think our maintenance plans at this point are probably top of mind for everybody. And then I think a big challenge that we're all thinking about and talking about coming out of the budget process especially is how are we using our existing resources, and how are we achieving our goals through our existing resources as opposed to adding resources. And then lastly, I'll say one of the big issues that we're facing is how we are growing sustainably in terms of the environment as well. And there's a lot of crossover there with some of the other projects that are happening in the city. But are we using drought-resistant plants and trees? Are we starting to talk about using no-mow grasses? Things of that nature. So I think that's a good start off on your question of where we're headed, and then let's go down the dais and get everybody's thoughts. I'll start at this end tonight. Chris.
Well, I think you pretty well just summed it up. I mean, I don't know, from my perspective, those are the kind of the key issues that are facing us in the parks. I think one of the big issues, of course, is paying for maintenance and maintaining these parks in the long run. And maybe it's more of a priority issue with the council of making sure that as we are creating more areas for our park and rec or our public works department to have to maintain, are we also providing long-term funding in order to maintain those areas that we're creating? Because it's nice to create these beautiful strips down Hill Road, but if we don't provide the maintenance to be able to keep up with them, what have we done? We've created a weed bed. So I think that's probably top of mind for me among all the other list of things that we have concerned. I mean, we got to make sure that these are accessible parks. I did find it interesting, the accessible picture that he had showed a staircase, which is not accessible for some of our handicapped folks. And so I think, you know, that's very important. As we're designing parks, we need to make sure they're readily accessible to everybody.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Zach?
Thank you. John, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
I am so excited to have you here. This has been a long time coming for me. I talked about it so much that my wife had to tell me to stop. She just was going to watch the meeting and learn all about it. So this is so cool. Thank you. But my 5-year-old son could not get enough of it. He was like, oh yeah, where are we putting all the trampolines and the Legos and the Hot Wheels track? Okay. On to something that you can use. Agree with a lot of what's been said. I'll try not to touch on similar things, but funding and maintenance instability, climate planning, actualizing plans, and so going through a really robust planning process. I have no doubt we'll be able to do that, but making sure that we have a plan that we could turn into an actionable, deliverable future is super important. Growth and evolution in character to the city of Mcminnville. I think we're right at the point of, I butcher the phrase every time, but we're a large town turning into a small city or whatever that is, and so there's a sort of a whole evolution in character that is taking place, and I think looking at how we want to be known in 30, 40, 50 years, parks and open spaces is going to be integral to that. A historic under collection on SDCs should be righted in this process. I think geographic constraints are really interesting to consider, not just in context of Oregon planning, but just the way that Mcminnville sits, there aren't logical large areas for us to grow in, and so I think looking at how we grow our parks and open spaces offering without massive city growth is going to be interesting. And then lastly, river water access, and that's something I just think is so magical, and you either have it or you don't, right? You can't include in your plan access to giant, beautiful snow-capped mountains because we don't have those. And we're just sort of really close to river and water access, and it would take a bigger effort to sort of crack that nut of how that becomes a beautiful Riverwalk stroll. And so that's sort of my really big pie in the sky, but river water access is, I think, a big challenge for us today and in the future. That's all I've got for now on that one. Thanks.
Thank you. Sal?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for doing such a great job with your list. I think it was spot on. I guess the only thing I'd add to what was said is that I think that we should be looking at a regional approach to parks. We have a lot of city-owned property in the West Hills that has recreational potential and that abuts other properties that have recreational potential. So I really appreciated, Zach, your referencing parks and open spaces, because that open spaces piece often gets cut off, and I feel like that's the area that I'd like to see the most improvement, which will obviously take long-term funding for staffing and maintenance.
Thank you. Should we just, do you want to take the lead on this, or should we move down your list of questions and go about it that way?
I think.
Yeah, sure. So this great input. Thank you so much for the first question.
Oh, Councilor Menke, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, we didn't finish. I'm sorry, the Zoom, it escapes me. Councilor Menke, we would love to hear from you as well on question number 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the most pressing thing to me is the sustainability of being able to offer these types of things, its recreational abilities. I'm very excited about the concept of gray water. I think we haven't used it nearly as much as we could. I'm concerned overall about the concept of water, although I know Water and Light has done their level best to ensure that we have water required in the future. I know things could change substantially depending on our neighboring states and their needs too. So I think that's something that should at least be considered in this. I would hope that we were really thinking outside the box about different types of recreation and different possibilities. I mean, a great deal of what we've looked at is pretty much what we've done before. I like Zach's idea about rivers and things like that. I think that would be wonderful if we could do it safely for the kids and for anybody. That's pretty much where I'm coming from. I agree with almost everything else everybody said. So, but I am concerned about the sustainability issue probably more than almost anything else. We've got to get that one figured out. And then how do we pay for the maintenance? It's huge.
Right, thank you very much.
And we have Council President Garvin on the line too.
We do. Well, fantastic. Council President Garvin, would you like to answer question number 1?
I would. Thank you for all the insightful comments from fellow councilors and you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second or third Zach's comments about water access. I've always thought that the Kiwanis Park down there at the entrance to Joe Dancer has the prime opportunity to allow some water access if we put a little bit more into that. The Riverwalk idea sounds great and very visionary, Zach. My concern would be sustainable maintenance of that going forward. And then I really want to just focus in on some of our older parks and how we can reimagine those. And like you mentioned, drought-resistant plants, Remy, and things that are less of a drain maintenance-wise on staff, so they have some capacity to keep the parks more beautiful than they've been in the last 3 to 5 years. I think that's a lot of feedback I get from citizens, is the parks don't have the beauty they once had within the city. And so although I'm in favor of bringing more things online, making sure we do what we have really well before we do a lot of things mediocre is kind of number 1 focus for me. And then I spent this last week out in Boise, and they had a lot of like exercise stations along walking paths, and I thought that was pretty neat when I was out walking with my family. And there's actually a lot of citizens using that out there, so that'd be another thing I'd be interested in incorporating into some of our open spaces and along our greenway trails and things like that.
Thank you, Council President. All right, I do believe we're now ready to move to question number 2.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Question number 2, kind of following along what we were just talking about. So thinking in the next 10 to 20 years into the future, what are some changes in parks and recreation that will make the biggest difference for the city?
Thank you, and we'll go in reverse order on this one. So Council President Garvin, if you'd like to start.
I think definitely having more covered, openly accessible areas in our parks is going to be a big thing moving forward, especially coming off of COVID and people needing to have places to gather. And that'd be something I would like to see more of in our vision going forward. And then some way to incorporate music. I mean, grand scheme of amphitheater would be awesome, but I don't know where that fits into this. So thank you.
Thank you. I won't suggest Quarry Park, which does have a natural amphitheater in it. Councillor Menke.
Why not?
Why not? Because there's other plans for it.
Okay, 10 to 20 years. Well, I'm down here in Carlsbad, California, and I'm looking at high desert ground. And even though Mcminnville's far from high desert, it could be high desert in 10 to 20 years. You just don't know how the weather's going to happen. I think trying a more diverse type of plantings, giving some real thought to the way we're planting, how much we're planting, and being a little more patient with things. I prefer seeing less dense plantings and a lot fewer weeds, things like that. Again, water is still a major concern, but then just, as I said before, being as innovative as possible. I love the idea of the music concerts. I used to go to them frequently. I haven't in a few years, but I think music and any way that we can bring people together is a great idea. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Peralta?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Menke. I think water utilization is going to be a bigger issue, and I think we're not really sure yet all of the differences we're going to see in transportation in the next 10 or 20 years. Not sure what the ramifications will be for parks.
Thank you. Councillor Gary?
Looking 10 to 20 years into the future, what changes in parks and recreation will make the biggest difference in our city? I think connectivity, the ability to sort of both circumnavigate via the parks and open spaces of the city would be super important and make a huge difference. I think having the parks and open spaces contribute to the and facilitate sort of cultural gathering spaces. So kind of that's a fancier way of saying cool amphitheaters and places to get together and hang out. But how can we set it up such that it facilitates those cultural gathering points? I think I heard a little bit of it in some of the answers before, but signage and communication and education and wayfinding such that you explain what is going on and what you're seeing, right? I think the old model of having a nice yard was it was mowed to laser precision and only grass existed and the water came on every morning for 25 minutes at 4 a.m. And now it's like, well, actually, maybe we should be letting things grow longer and more fallow and have nice areas for bees and animals to gather and maybe kind of what Garvin was alluding to, walking through the paths, learning about that as you walk through the path. I think bringing people along for the ride is really cool. And I think what's most exciting about 10 to 20 years out is really taking the lead and making sure our parks and open spaces are why people want to come here and stay here and live here and be here. It's the definable draw. I think too often I hear about sort of intangibles or things that aren't under our control, but we can really laser focus and make it why Mcminnville is known and sought out after.
Thank you. I think the only thing that I would add would be that we are also looking at our street plans when we're looking at these parks plans, so that when we're thinking about accessibility and connectivity, that we're also planning how families can safely travel along our roads to be accessing these different parks. I would underline the environmental pressures that will be coming, and that's a very difficult thing to be planning for, as Councilor Peralta said, because there's many things we don't know, including exactly what's going to be happening, but being very preventative in those efforts, I think, is huge. And then honestly, the way that this process is conducted, I think it will be one of the main things that makes a difference in what our parks and recreation look like for our city. And I think that another area of focus to bring is kind of our older youth, our teenagers. So we have a lot of parks that cater to younger people, and we have parks that cater to people that are older, have, but our teenagers don't have as many activities easily accessible to them through our parks if they're not in programming. Okay, and we're ready to move to question number 3. Oh, go ahead, Councilor Chenoweth.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could make an answer to number 2.
Yeah, oh, did I? I'm sorry, I need to make a list.
You're fine.
Apologize.
So when I look 10 to 20 years into the future, what changes do I think will make the biggest difference for our city? I'm going to give an answer that's going to be very vague because I'm not super creative. That's not my strength. I'm analytic. But the creativity that goes into designing our parks going forward, and the forward thinking that we put into it, bringing new ideas that have not been done or have been done very rarely but done well, finding those cutting edge approaches to parks that maybe we aren't even thinking of yet at this table, that's going to make the biggest difference. How we get ahead of creativity is what's going to, I think, going to be the biggest definer. I would like to tag into what Madam Mayor said regarding the teenagers and the older users of the park system. I think it's very important that we keep them at the top of mind. There's very little in Mcminnville for that age demographic to do here. And where we can do our best to try to give them something to do, we need to keep them in the process at top of mind. I don't know if there's a way to tie in technology with our park system as a way to help to do that. But we've got to make sure that we're not designing things always with the same process we've done in the past and try to move forward. The last thing I would say is that I've lived in Mcminnville for 35 years, and it took me, I think, 6 or 7 years to even know that the walking park off of West Side Road was there after it was constructed. So I'd say one of the things that would be I think it's something we grapple with as a city, is how to communicate to the residents what we're providing, what we have out there. And that's going to have a huge impact on A, funding, because if they know what we have and what we're providing, they're going to be more apt to support it. But B, it's also on usage of it. So finding a better way to communicate to our residents what we have available is also going to be, I think, one of the biggest difference makers.
Thank you, Councilor. So I'm seeing a large wayfinding sign at the entrance to each park with a QR code, and then you can have your options of if you go play a tech game through the park or you just find the multitude of parks. It'll bring up your map of all parks. Okay, wonderful.
Sounds fun. The county did tangle boxing, and I've done that for years. Loved it because for 2 reasons. 1, it was fun. 2, I ended up finding parks I didn't even know existed in the county.
Great, wonderful. I believe we're ready for question number 3. Would you like to pose a question?
Yeah, so question 3, I guess it's another way of what we were just talking about, but really focusing it down to one thing. So all the different ideas we've just been discussing, all very important. But what is one priority you would like to see accomplished through this project?
Thank you. Councilor Geary?
I find it hard to be limited to one, but I think given you've heard plenty about how we want it to be environmentally conscious and create carbon sinks and do all sorts of cool things with our parks. I think I'll stick to, having it be sort of the showpiece of what the city's known for in 40 years is what this plan accomplishes in 20 years from now. I think that's probably the most important thing, because if we do that, then all of the things inside of it will be taken care of. We'll meet the 8 to 80 standard. We'll have rainwater recycled splash pads. We'll have bee safe parks, and we'll do all that sort of stuff. So I think having it be sort of our crowning achievement is going to be, and what people are proud of, will be important.
Thank you. Councillor Menke?
Well, hashtag, I thought you'd take the obvious, but I guess not, so I will. I'd really like to see the MacPac project fulfilled. I realize that that's kind of like easy pickings, but I think it'd be a wonderful thing. We've got so many kind of just decrepit buildings that are being used by Parks and Rec that definitely need to have some expansion. And, we're a growing community too. So I would like to see the MacPac fulfilled.
Thank you. Councillor Peralta?
Hard to pick just one. Yeah, I agree with Kelly. I think the MacPac.
Thank you. Council President Garvin?
I would second Zach's point. I think as long as it's when this plan comes to fruition and it's completed, it's a major driver of why somebody wants to live in our community. I think that marks it as a success, and the reasons he cited, I would second.
Thank you, and Councillor Chenoweth.
I'm going to go off on my own and say I think probably the most important priority to me is to have a plan that is financially doable. It's great to have great aspirations and great ideas, but if at the end of the day the residents don't want to pay for those great ideas and great aspirations, we hit a wall. So I think that's probably my number one priority.
Thank you. I'm going to pick something no one said, not that I don't agree with my council here, because I do. I think that something I haven't heard yet, though, is the engagement of nonprofits in the development of not only the plan as part of the answer on number 4, but then the execution of the plan. Would you like to take us to question number 4, please?
Great segue. So one of the first things we'll be doing following tonight's meeting is starting to put that plan together for community engagement. So a lot of specifics, goals, timing, who's involved, and so forth. So as I mentioned in the presentation, we are creating a process that's founded on equitable engagement. So who would you like to see involved in the planning process? It could be any one particular group. Would you like to see involved?
Thank you. Could I ask a question before we go into that? When you mentioned some of the community engagement, you showed us outreach, written outreach that was being done in English and Spanish, inviting to community meetings. Are we going to be hosting the community meetings in English and in Spanish? Or is that part of the plan in terms of outreach?
It is, yeah. I think all of the outreach materials, so if we're asking a question, it'll be done in English and Spanish.
Okay, thank you. So can you answer one more question before we go to the council on this?
Sure.
Do you have a list of organizations that you already intend to reach out to that maybe you could inform us of first?
We don't have that yet. I think we've got some of the. I'll defer to Susan, but we're still working through what that list should include. But I'll let Susan answer that one.
Sure. We will plan on touching base with some of the same groups we used for the MACPAC process. Also, through this, we will be identifying partners. Obviously, the school district is a big partner with us in terms of open space and recreation amenities. So we'll start with that list that we used for MACPAC. And through that process, we did a similar focus group. And actually, MIG ran this part of the process for us. We did focus groups specifically for certain users. So we'll bring in the special interest kind of things, and then we'll work with the community representative groups that we work with, like County Health, Unidos. We'll include a lot of those, but if you have any that we can cross-check with that, we will definitely do that.
Great. Well, let's go to each counselor again. Counselor Chenoweth, we'll start with you this time.
Can I process question?
Oh,
real
yeah,
quick?
please.
Are we going to be able to ask questions of the consultant, or via this answer, should I shoehorn in my questions?
That would be
I'd say
great,
based
yeah.
on time, let's try to answer the question, and then we'll come back to your question. You don't need to
Okay,
shoehorn
cool.
it in. Perfect. So Counselor Chenoweth,
So I think it's kind of obvious that we need to reach a diverse group of people. So I'm not going to focus on that because I'm sure multiple counselors will do that. Instead, I want to focus on making sure we reach those that we would normally not reach. We normally would reach the users. We normally would reach these different groups that you're referring to. What we normally wouldn't do, or maybe haven't done, or in my mind we haven't done, and maybe we have and I just don't know it, is reach the wider groups that don't actually ever use the park. I don't know that we make a concentrated effort to reach into the business community. But I'd like to see that happen because it is important, if we're going to succeed in what we're doing, that we bring everybody on board, not just a small portion. So I'd like to see a wide outreach, because I think what we'll find is the more people we bring to the table, even from those groups that we don't normally think of, the more likely we're going to get their buy-in to make happen what we want to have happen.
thank you, Counselor. Council President Garvin.
Thank you, Mayor. To just get your baseline list of MACPAC groups and the 2032 strategic plan participants would be the baseline. And then from there, I'd look to try and incorporate some club user groups that maybe haven't been represented. And I don't know, they possibly have been, but MacJBO comes to mind. I know they look for a lot of different spaces to utilize to help the youth in the area. And then daycare providers, part of the daycare to be certified through the state is to have your kids outside playing. And so I think if we could tap into that network within the city of certified daycare providers and see why they use the parks or why they don't use the parks, we could develop better open spaces for that young youth that right now might just be hanging out in the backyard or be only set at the same playground every day. So that would probably be the biggest group I'd want to see us reach out to.
Thank you. Councillor Menke.
In thinking about this, I'd like to change the question just a little bit. I'm thinking back to things that we've done in the past, since I've been on council a long time. One of the more successful things, I think, well, I can think of two. One of them was a campaign just basically to get input from people, where we went out to each different ward and we spent an evening with them and we brainstormed and said, what do you think? What's important to you, basically. It had to be fairly well advertised. It was online too. People could go online and also do the same questions that we were asking in person. But it was a nice way to get the counselors out to see their ward people. And it was a great opportunity to just kind of have people in an area, I think we mostly use schools, where they felt comfortable and relaxed enough to sit down and say, well, this is really what I'm interested in. You know, we had a great airport group that was really intense. And there were a couple other groups that were heavily interested. And this wasn't a Parks and Rec thing. This was just kind of getting some input as to what people thought was important within the city. The other thing that I think could be used in a similar way was the city fair, which, again, and I know all Parks and Rec people cringe at it, but it was a very nice opportunity for people to just come out, bring their kids, have a great time. But there were different options, you know, there were different booths that people could go and talk to and find out about things. The library one was always a big hit. The Parks and Rec was too, and it was a real opportunity for people to say what they liked about the city, what they didn't, learn things about the city. So those are ways that I think would be maybe a possibility or something, you know, kind of similar to it, to get people involved on a more relaxed level and make them, you know, have them have the opportunity. We had a very good turnout for city fairs. What do you think? I think we had maybe 30 at most of the meetings.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peralta?
Thank you, Mayor. Good suggestions, Kelly, as for process. I would suggest the Watershed Council and Soil and Water Conservation District related to outside spaces. One group that often gets overlooked from a DEI perspective is the Hispanic PTA at the school district. And then I'm not sure the name of the group, but there's a group that does the victory gardens and the edible streetscaping. We have a couple of parks that would be kind of interesting to transition to more garden, community garden type things.
Thank you, Councillor Gary.
Okay. I think as we look to who and how, I think an even balance of special interest and, I don't know what the other side is, but basic interest, right? So every diehard, born-in-the-wool pickleballer should be balanced out on the other side of the scale with a one-time or future potential user that is not super special interest that just wants to go lay in the grass and have a picnic. I mean, you know, we need the expertise of the pickleballers and the tennis club and the football players and all those things, but we also need to balance that out and ensure that it's low barrier, it's equitable, and it's not off-footing. And so I think as far as how and who we engage, an even balance of things like that. Looking at ways to make sure, and maybe this is more of output and models on how to successfully look at and govern distribution of parks and open spaces, but ensuring that we're getting representation from a finite, not necessarily just our 3 wards, but our census tracts and our niche neighborhoods, and looking out into how we are split up and making sure someone from those communities is coming in to represent those areas. You know, one of the biggest things from the MacPac and was, looking at the location was how impactful it would be to so many people who are so underserved if it goes over by Albertsons. It was just really impactful to look at that census tract data in terms of how we serve the community with this type of offering. I think tourism stakeholders, while I want to make sure this is a community, first and foremost, a community effort, and it's for the citizens for now and forever, I want to make sure that our tourism stakeholders are at the table to ensure that we do it such that it can continue to be an asset in that marketability of Mcminnville, and maybe look at ways that current and future tourism efforts can help fund the development as they've talked about destination development, can fund this and future efforts. I think county-wide agencies, Sal, you talked about making it a regional effort, and I think looking at some of those broader efforts like Watershed Council and Basin Council and maybe local chapters of Nature Conservancy and things like that to make sure that they're helping us look at a broader spectrum.
Thank you, Counselor. I would add Oregon Community Foundation as a potential for helping us bridge some gaps there, potentially the OSU Extension Office that's located here, potentially Linfield University or some of the student groups within that. And I think everybody else hit everything else. That leaves us, and what's that? Oh, go ahead, Counselor Menke.
I did think of one other one. As I think about my time during COVID, I spent a lot of time walking outdoors. And honestly, dog owners.
What?
I know it sounds crazy, but dog owners really
Dog
knew
owners.
what's
Oh.
going on around the outside and what they would like. I just bring that, well, any pet owner, but particularly dog owners. And I think they come to meetings because they're profoundly interested in their pets and what's happening with them.
Wonderful, thank you. And then we have just 2 minutes left before our next meeting is set to begin, and I know Councilor Gary had a question.
I could submit them at another time. That's all right.
Okay. Would you like to say anything in conclusion then?
No, but if you do have follow-up questions, feel free to send them to me. We'll answer them, and I'll send them out to the full council as they come in, and we'll be back.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on Zoom, and thanks for being here to present. It's great, exciting.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Okay, we'll now adjourn the work session at 5:58 PM, and we'll take a 2-minute break and then go into our special council meeting at 6 PM. Thank you. We're just waiting for everybody to reconvene. Do we know what happened to the applicants that were asked to leave for the first interview? Is that why they've left the room, or? Yes. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Mcminnville City Council on June 22nd, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:02 and call on Claudia Cisneros to do roll call.
Counselor Geary. He's here, but not in the room. Counselor Minke. And she is on Zoom. Counselor Chenoweth.
Here.
Counselor Peralta.
Here.
Council President Garvin.
Here and en route to in-person.
And Interim Mayor Drapkin.
Here.
And I'm here.
And Councilor Menke's here. Okay, wonderful. We will now begin the interviews of the City Council Ward 3 vacancy. We will start with Scott Cunningham, and then we will hear from Richard Smith, and Raymond Reimer, Mark Davis, Tynan Pierce, and Jessica Payne, and then we'll have an opportunity to deliberate. And so with that, if you'll please find your binders with your interview questions attached. And we're going to go across the dais, giving each counselor an opportunity to ask questions. Do encourage counselors to ask the same question of all of the applicants. Thank you. And so we will start this evening with Counselor Geary. And if you would like to, well, actually, let's start this evening with Mr. Cunningham. Would you like to introduce yourself, tell the council a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dig into our interview questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Scott Cunningham. Many of you may know me as a local business owner. I have Community Plate Restaurant, and we've had that for a little over 10 years now. And then about a little bit more than 4 years ago, we started Pizza Capo with a couple of business partners. My wife and I have lived in Mcminnville for a little bit more than 10 years. Courtney actually a little longer than myself. I've been involved in just being a part of the downtown scene, as well as spending quite a few years on the MDA, becoming in the executive team and being president for a couple of years. So, and I'm really honored to be here this evening, and thankful to you, Mayor, and all the counselors for taking the time to listen to all these candidates. And actually looking at the candidates, I think no matter what, you're going to have a good fellow counselor join your team, no matter any way, because they all look really good.
Thank you. And we'll now start with Counselor Geary. Just any of the questions you'd like to ask. Oh, the one that's assigned to you. Sorry, it was assigned to you. Apologies. Yes, well, I'm a little out of order this evening.
Scott, we are rolling. We are rolling tonight. So let me ask, city councilors are meant to put their personal priorities and values second, behind the interests of their ward and the city as a whole. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to set aside your personal preferences for the interests of others? And I'm happy to repeat that if need be.
No, I do not need that repeated. Yes, I can speak to a time, actually, while I was on the MBA. And in fact, I believe I was president during this period of time. Some of you counselors may remember that the MDA went through a period of time where I believe we went through 3 city managers / executive directors in the span of about 5 years or so. So in one of the hiring periods. We had a couple great candidates, but one candidate that really stood out and had many of the skills and qualifications, but that I felt lacked the experience. And so I had some serious concerns about this candidate and how they would do in the job. But being a part of a board of 8 or 9 folks, everybody else really felt pretty strongly that this was the candidate that we needed to go for. So talking it all through and working with the board, we ultimately chose that candidate. I did let the board then know that it was all of our responsibilities to really be there to support the candidate and to make sure that they got the support that they needed to do an effective job. And I would say that I would hope everyone who was on that board would agree that I did give them my entire support and continued to do so throughout the period of time that they were the executive director. So I would say that was probably the time where everyone else was, rooting for, going for somebody else, and I had to get behind them and really support the person that they chose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Peralta.
Hi, Scott, thanks for being with us tonight.
Yep.
Why are you interested in this position, and what experiences and skills would you bring to the role?
Well, honestly, my family and I have benefited greatly from this community and have really just come to love the city of McMinnville. It's where we chose to, open up several businesses. It's where I've really put down my roots, and have enjoyed being a part of this community. So it would be an absolute honor for me to be on the city council to help guide the city through the many changes that are ahead, in the very next short few years, but to those that will be 10 to 20 to 30 years on. And in fact, I finally will get to use my college degree of government major from the University of Redlands. So I hadn't had the opportunity yet. So, and honestly, another of the experiences and skills that I would say is I really do owe it to my father, who was a judge for the Contra Costa County for over 20 years, and his sense of fairness. And that it's really important to look at every single situation and give it a fair look. And so I think that it's when making these decisions that have very long-term impacts and or consequences, it's really important to take a look at the whole broader picture. And I feel that that's one of the things I generally have to do on a day-to-day basis, is looking at the broader picture and really trying to make decisions based off of that. And so I would say those are definitely the skills that I would bring, as well as running 2 restaurants, going through pandemics and or recessions. I have had my fill of budgeting and or pivoting and or whatever you can come up with to address all of those immediate issues that we were facing over the last several years and earlier on in 2008, 2009.
Thank you. Councilor Menke.
Hi, Scott. Okay, my question is, what do you think the city is doing well, and what do you think the city could do better, and how?
All right. Well, it's so interesting that the work session started off with parks today. And I swear when I was thinking through these questions, that I really do think that the forethought that our city puts into planning is incredible. I really do think that taking into consideration, the MAC PAC and MAC 2032 is fantastic. And I think that it'll only help our next generations and the growth as we go to really have a real strong look at it and a definition of what we want and how we're going to get through to the next part. I think one of the things that the city also did early on and has done for years, is actually acquiring all the water rights for the potential growth that we're going to go through. That's incredibly visionary, and so I cannot say enough for the folks that did that. The other thing that I want to speak on is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. It came up time and time again of how in the parks we're trying to be equitable and inclusionary to as many people as possible. And so I think that it's wonderful to be in a community where they really are putting that forward as one of the priorities that we're all looking at. The other thing that I would say, and this involves several groups, but one of the things that I've been witness to, because many of the meetings happened at Community Plate, but is the stable table. Having the chamber, the MEDP, MDA, and Visit Mcminnville all working together to create a better environment for all of Mcminnville is fantastic. And I cannot compliment all those people that are involved more. So, and then I think the bad, I think we all hear about it, all the time. Personally, I think affordable housing is at the top of my list. Being in restaurants that have minimum wage workers that do get tips, but it's hard to find a good place to live at a very reasonable price. And it's something that we hear when we're trying to hire people trying to move here, being able to find a place to live so that they can move here. And I think we've missed out as a community in being able to bring workers to Mcminnville by the pure fact that there just isn't enough affordable housing. So with that, I think as we look into the future with the urban growth boundary growing, that we take all of that and that make sure that it appropriately accommodates our future needs. I think I know that they're bringing all of the groups to the table, all the stakeholders, and I think that's fantastic, because in the past, there are some issues of limiting the urban growth boundary, and it kind of bit us a little bit. So I think looking at it appropriately to accommodate our future growth and to specifically take into consideration the affordable housing is really important. I think we also need to specifically, as a community, seek out developers that specialize in affordable housing. People that have learned all the tricks to do as much density as possible, but have it still be a very comfortable, livable space. The other thing that I would say is if we can lower any barriers to developing affordable housing projects as possible. I know that a lot of that comes with the economics of everything, but it sure is going to be tough for us if the only homes that get built from now on are $500,000 plus homes. So another area that we're really struggling in is that we need to support our local police and fire departments to help retain and build their staffing levels. I know that this was a major, major part of the budget discussions that you all have just gone through, and I know that this is probably the hardest part of what y'all do. So certainly, for me, discussing the funding sources and the appropriate steps that we need to make the budget and the funding sources align. So, and I think that with that also is marketing MAC itself to these groups, to the fire department, to the EMT, to the police officers, so that they know that Mcminnville is a great place to live and a great place to work. So, and then beyond that, I would say that we definitely need to address the concerns within those departments beyond the funding needs. So whatever the boots on the ground, whatever the folks there need to just have a better working environment, I would say. So, and that's what I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Council President Garvin.
Thank you, Scott. Great answer to your first couple questions here. This one's a little long-winded, so let me know if you need it repeated. But there are 7 city council positions, including the mayor position, and there's a lot of debate and shared decision making. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to find a solution with someone you disagreed with, or how you have dealt with conflicts, for example, with a coworker or a neighbor?
Sure. Yeah, I guess what I'd start off with is every day of my life in the restaurant industry is conflict resolution. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics. Many of you may know the difference between the front of the house and the back of the house, but it's definitely something that we walk a tightrope of balance on. And so with that, I can't necessarily speak to one particular conflict resolution, but what I can tell you is that what I've found through my conflict resolution, that the number one thing you need to do is, first of all, is stop and listen. Listen to what the other folks are trying to tell you. Listen to what their issues are and truly understand what those might be. Because you first also have to find the source of the conflict. What is it that is driving the issue? Because once you've listened to the other side and once we've found the source of the conflict, then hopefully we can together communicate in a way that will help us come to an equitable resolution. You may not necessarily always attain a resolution that everyone's happy with, but the one thing that's interesting is that no matter what, is you have to be able to get up from that table and know that you're going to be able to get the job done. There's been many, fiery interactions between me and a chef or me and another manager, where you have to agree that when it's all said and done, you walk away and you shake hands and you're ready to go to work, because we can't leave a conflict that is out there just simmering, because all it does is it just boils back up in the next one and the next one and the next one. And so honestly, I think that is the best way to deal with conflict resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Chenoweth.
First, I want to say thank you for applying, and I agree with you. We have a great group of candidates, so thank you very much. My question for you is, city council members are always tackling budget and spending issues for the city of Mcminnville. Tell me about a time you navigated a budget issue and what idea solved the issue.
Well, again, I would have to just say primarily all in my restaurant experience. We did have some budget issues within the MDA, but specifically with restaurants, is it's very heavy cash in, cash out, and so you can create a budget and you want to stick to that budget. But oftentimes there's lots of issues that may arrive. You have a refrigerator that breaks. You have to find a way to repair it or replace it. And so it's been a constant dealing with budget issues. I mean, the first time I would say I had an issue is probably in the .com era when everything exploded and 9/11 happened and we saw a massive drop in business. And, one of the things that I learned early on then, which I think really does pertain to the city council and the rest of the departments, is that you have to realize and understand that your staff is your number one resource. And so it is imperative to protect that resource throughout the budget issues that may arrive. And so some of that is really hard. I mean, you really want to make sure that you're taking care of folks. You really want to make sure that you're not having layoffs, but trying to be equitable when you come to that budgeting is really important when it comes to restaurants specifically. So with that, I would also say that clearly COVID has been very unique for every business that's out there. And so again, it's being flexible, but trying to reach decisions that are the best for the business, as hopefully as best for your staff as possible, and that allows you to continue on servicing the people that come in your door or order online. So beyond that, I don't know if I have much more of an answer.
Thank you. And do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, the one question that I have for you, and this isn't necessarily specific for any one counselor, but in the sense that I just wanted to see, what is one trait that you most admire of your fellow counselors?
Thank you. Counselor Menke.
It may seem a bit simplistic, but my answer is civility. I mean, you're not always going to agree with your fellow counselors, and there are times you may really strongly disagree, but you must be civil.
Thank you.
That's my answer.
Would anybody
Others
else?
may have other answers.
Would anyone else from the council like to answer? One trait that you most admire from your fellow of your fellow counselors? Anyone?
I appreciate that people on the board come in to try and solve problems for the community. Not everybody does.
Yeah, I would say self-sacrificing. What I see, we don't all come from the same background. We don't have all the same perspective, but all of us come because we want to serve and we want to help our community. So I think that's probably the quality in each and every one of these counselors that I see that I most admire.
Thank you.
I think mine would be most easily summed up by saying pragmatism, but sort of flexibility and understanding that I am and will represent what makes me me, and that everyone here is doing the same, and that we will use high topic tension to gain equitable consensus and move forward. So sort of getting through it pragmatically and achieving results.
Thank you. Council President Garvin?
I appreciate fellow members of the council's ability to have tough discussions, and by the time we arrive at the next meeting, we're tackling another problem, and for the most part, we put all that behind us, and it's a new day and a new problem, and we can look forward to the future and the policy in front of us, and not be rehashing what's in the past.
Thank you. I generally agree with everything the counselors have said, and I think if I had to underline one additional trait, it would be preparedness. There's a tremendous amount of preparation that really is required going into not only these meetings, but also committee assignments. And as respectful to staff and co-counselors and the community at large, the preparedness and timeliness is important and challenging at times as well. And which kind of ties into some of the other points that were made, that sometimes you do have to set a lot aside in order to come to these meetings prepared. All right, well, thank you very much for your time, and we will be making an appointment most likely making an appointment at the following meeting, and so Claudia will be in touch to communicate with you in advance of that meeting.
All right. Well, I do also just want to add on, this is separate of everything, but tomorrow at 8 o'clock Eastern time, we will have 2 of our Mac High students competing at Skills USA, and it is a hugely daunting, amazing thing that these kids are doing representing the state of Oregon. So please have them in your thoughts and give them lots of energy. It's really cool. We'll tell you a lot about it when we get back. So, and then I'm not sure if my head is huge on this screen here, but I promise this is the largest my head will ever be.
Well, thank you for the report, and good practice, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'll get it in order this time, I'm sorry. Do what?
Do participants have to be present to win?
It's a vote of the council. Hi. That's all you, I think. Oh, that's at Kelly's.
Over here, boss. What's that?
Do we have Richard Smith here?
Claudia messed up.
I mean, I've redone this seating chart many times. Joking, of course. My siblings came to town for family dinner. They asked me, where are we supposed to sit at the table? I said, it's family dinner. You get to choose where you sit. I know, right? Good evening, Mr. Davis.
Good evening, Mayor Drabkin.
Nice to see you again.
I do want to state that my agenda is, or my interview schedule is incorrect, and Mark Davis is next. My apologies.
No worries.
You mean it's not 7:30?
Wonderful. Well, we're going to go around the council and everybody will ask you a singular question. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the end as well. Although we all know you here, will you please also start just by way of introduction and telling us a little bit about yourself before we begin?
Okay, Mark Davis. I feel like I'm supposed to tell you my address, but I'll skip that.
That's been blocked out for the record.
Gee, I got to tell you a little bit about myself. Well, you have my resume in front of you. I've lived in Yamhill County since 1976. I first moved to Lafayette, and we moved to Mcminnville in 1993. So I've been in the city almost 30 years, 29 years. Let's see. Worked construction when I was younger, managed the Natural Foods Co-op that was at 707 East 3rd Street, still remember the address. I went to Linfield College between 1986 and 1989. Graduated with a degree in accounting and computing science, went to work for a CPA firm in the Portland metro area. Worked there for 5 years, and then came to work at the Housing Authority of Yamhill County. Essentially worked there for 19 years with the exception of a couple of long vacations to hike the Pacific Crest Trail and the Continental Divide Trail. I've been active in the community in a lot of different organizations, groups over the years. Probably most relevant, I've put the city stuff I've been involved in. I've been a volunteer at the library weekly since about 2013. I'm involved with Friends of the Library, so I'm a big supporter of the library. So that's probably my most direct connection to city operations.
Wonderful, thank you. And with that, we'll start with questions from councilors. Councilor Peralta, will you begin?
Thanks, Sal.
Why are you interested in the position, and what experience and skills would you bring to it?
Thank you. I think that the city is, and probably everybody would think that the current time is the most important time, but I really think the city is at a transition point, and I think some important decisions are going to be made in the next few years. And I feel like I have a background in city issues and knowledge of those issues that I think I could contribute, to those decisions. I mean, that's kind of the why. The experiences, I've served on various city committees, starting with the Citizens Advisory Committee, 1996. I was involved through that committee with all the urban growth boundary, I don't know what the right noun I should use there, but activities, I'll just keep it neutral, for many years that ultimately I just stopped following it. It went off into the courts and reemerged recently, and you finally passed a version of that, which I was pleased and surprised to see that it came back out. I attend meetings. I attend your meetings. I go to the Planning Commission meetings. I go to the Budget Committee meetings. I go to the Mac Water and Light meetings. I read the packets. So I am, I believe, as familiar as anyone with the issues of what's going on in the city. My background, I was a CPA, so I have a pretty good grasp of financial issues. Worked for a government agency, so understand the basics of governmental accounting. I was also property development director for the Housing Authority for the last 10 years of my career there, so I know quite a bit about affordable housing and what it takes to develop it. And I was the developer for the Housing Authority on the Village Quarter project that's there on 3rd Street by the railroad tracks.
Thank you. Councilor Menke?
Good evening, Mark. Excuse me. What do you think the city is doing well, and what do you think the city can do better, and how?
Thank you, Councilor Menke. I thought about this since Claudia emailed the questions to me, and I actually I'm going to give an answer that's a variation on something that Councilor Gary brought up during the parks discussion, and that is that what I think the city does really well is be a large town. I mean, we have spent many years perfecting how to, have this city run, with volunteers, with, I won't say baling wire and duct tape, but a lot of, the way we've operated is kind of, we're a small town, we don't want to, rock the boat. We'll just keep making do with the budgets, and, we've, have gone like that. But I think it's created an incredible environment. I mean, we do have nice parks. The fire department, the EMTs show up when you call. The police actually respond. I mean, it's not like big cities where, you don't hear, so you get responses. The library does a great job, deals with a broad cross-section of the community in a very thoughtful way, I think. I mean, the parks, we have a good park system. I mean, you can talk about all the various things we've got in the city, and I think they're all really great. Where I see that we could do better is that we're in a transition period. I mean, if nothing else has come across in the last year with the budget committee meetings, it's that we need to professionalize and, change how we're operating the city. And I understand that. I'm sure all of you understand it. I know that the management staff understands that. I just think that the public is still stuck back in the old 80s, 90s mentality of, well, we can get by and, some money will show up, or we can just cut here or cut there and things will all work out. And I just think that we've got to reach out to the public and explain to them that this is now a, small city, and we have needs that are not being met with the old way of doing things, and we're going to have to make some changes that are, going to be costly, and, it's not going to be the same city with a couple of traffic lights in when I moved here.
Thank you. Council President Garvin.
Mark, there are 7 city council positions, including the mayor position, and there's a lot of debate and shared decision-making, as you're aware. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to find a solution with someone you disagreed with, or how you have dealt with conflict, for example, with a coworker or a neighbor?
I kind of wrestle with how to answer this question. I'm gonna take an example from my time on YCAP's board. I was on the board for more than 10 years. I'm sure many of you were around when YCAP did its capital campaign and constructed the new building out there along the off Riverside. That process was very typical of the large small town mentality of how things got done in those days. I mean, we did a capital campaign, we raised what we thought was a lot of money, and then the reality of, building that project was going to take a lot more money than what we were going to be able to raise. And so we went looking for a local contractor who would give us a discount, and, we found somebody in Yamhill County that was, believed in the mission and wanted to help us and was willing to twist arms with the subcontractors to get discounts, and we proceeded. I was on the construction oversight committee with Lee Vasquez and Waldo Farnham, and, it started out, pretty typically, and as things went along, it was like, whoa, we're starting, because it's a small town, you start hearing things about the subcontractors are not getting paid, and, those kind of things. And so we had to, deal with, keeping this project going, because realistically, if the contractor, went under, there was going to be no, cheap or simple way to get the project finished. It's just, sometimes you have to look somebody in the eye and talk to them and, let's work this out. And we were able to do that. I'm not going to go into details, but basically the project got completed. The contractor filed for bankruptcy shortly after the project was finished. I'm not saying it's the best, construction project in Mcminnville, but for what YCAP needed, it was a tremendous step forward. So,
thank you. Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mark. City councilors are meant to put their personal priorities and values second, behind the interests of their ward and the city as a whole. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to set aside your personal preferences for the interests of others?
In a lot of ways, listening to that, it almost sounds like, growing up in a family. I grew up in a large family. And, you never 100% get your way, and you learn how to, negotiate your way into getting your way part of the time and, not the rest of the time. But I'm assuming that we're talking more on a broader scale here. I'm going to talk about something that happened at the Housing Authority, because in some ways it's sort of relevant to this position. I was a staff member there and part of management staff, and I would go to the board meetings. But, the board sets policy. You carry policy out. I mean, and that's the, the same division you see here with your staff. You're not part of the policy, making decision. And there was one time when something I felt really strongly about personally came up as an issue, and in particular, this had to do with immigration status. The federal government that the project involved was not requiring a check of immigration status for people to live there. That wasn't a legal requirement. However, our board chose to impose that test. Personally, I didn't agree with that, but I felt, okay, this is their decision, and it's not my, place to be telling them how to set policy. So I went along with that. I still, to this day, kind of, me, I'm willing to say what I think, but I kind of wonder if I did the right thing or not. But, you sometimes have to swallow what you believe and go along with what the group's, what you've agreed to.
Thank you. Councillor Chenoweth?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for applying, as I said to the previous candidate. We have quite a list here, and all of them are good. So thank you. City council members are always tackling budget and spending issues for the city of McMinnville. Tell me about a time you navigated a budget issue and what idea actually solved that issue.
Okay, I think I'm going to go back to the Housing Authority. I was a finance director there for 7 years, and, I prepared the budgets and presented them, and, we're quite as big an operations here, but we're talking in the millions of dollars and lots of money with strings attached for the federal government. Most, probably the most difficult budget issues I found had to do with people. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, we'll cut the training budget a little bit, or, we'll, travel is not going to be as much, or heck, we can put off repairs and maintenance, so cut that budget a little this year, I mean, it's the very same thing the city has to do sometimes. But the hard choices are when you're talking about people. They're your fellow workers, you're working with them. And those were the decisions that I found the most difficult. I mean, most of the time, we were steady, but I remember one time in particular, we realized, our funding was being cut. And probably most of you don't know, but housing authorities have no authority to tax. So basically, we can raise rent all we want, but that's kind of counterproductive to what we're trying to do, is to make rent affordable. So really, when you get a budget cut from HUD, you have to figure out, if it's a small one, maybe you can get by with those small kind of cuts. But, the reality was we had to tell somebody they were going to be laid off. And, it really, as far as solving it, there's not really a solution. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do when we're doing a budget. Now, fortunately, we were able to, get the position back and even another one. So we ended up hiring 2 more people in the following year. So, I mean, I don't think it's all doom and gloom with budgets, but sometimes you have to make tough choices.
Thank you. And do you have any questions for us?
Not particularly. I mean, as far as the operation of the council, I think I have a pretty good idea of meeting schedules and all the practical details. I mean, you'd probably take this as a little bit flippant, but I'd be interested in hearing some of your answers to the questions you ask me. But I've realized this isn't the time and place to be carrying on a dialogue of that sort. But, for what it's worth, that's really all I have. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time here today. As you know, we will most likely be appointing at the next council meeting, and Claudia will be in touch in advance of that time. Thank you so much.
When I was on Zoom, you were pretty hard to hear, so if you move your mic just a little bit.
Are we waiting for the next candidate?
Yes, we're waiting for the next candidate. They're scheduled at 7 o'clock. They're not here yet, so we could take a 10-minute break.
Okay, who is the next candidate, Ray?
The next candidate is Tynan Pierce, and then it'll be Richard Smith, and then Raymond Reimer, and Jessica Payne.
Okay, thank you. All right, yeah, 10 minutes would be nice.
All right, let's break for 10 minutes then. Yeah, we had, somebody stole some of the new windows out of the site last night and stuff, so, you know, there's challenges, but we're getting through it. The production facility will be done on time, especially since now it's really harvest, so that's good. Yeah, and the offices above, there's offices above, that's all I meant, the offices won't be done, but the production part will be.
Taking four meetings, which might take 2 months and screw up the fiscal projection. So anyhow, I sat down and spent a little time yesterday, because I hadn't heard that one, and I didn't receive one from Jennifer, so. But I didn't also want to kind of recreate the wheel if we don't need to do that.
We do have one counselor on Zoom, and we did take about a 10-minute break, so it might be, I'm not sure if Counselor Menke's back yet or
to really adore it. And so we bought our first home and we moved here and we've been here ever since. And we didn't see it as like a flip home or anything. We see it as our forever home. I was raised in a small town in Massachusetts, and I think that Mcminnville is a really wonderful example of the intersection of small town values and also within this larger context of urban growth. And we've definitely enjoyed our time living here. I think that engaging at a civic level can look like many different things, and I find it personally important to myself to do those things. And so city council is a really interesting avenue that I could see myself participating in, to participate in the larger vision of what the city wants to move forward, to embrace and kind of confront the challenges that are going to be coming down the pipe now and also 10, 20, 30 years in the future. So I think that's like kind of the short version, really.
Thank you. Councilor Peralta.
Thank you, Mayor. Why are you interested, well, I guess you said a little bit, but we have the same questions for every applicant. Why are you interested in the position? What experience and skills will you bring to the role?
So not to be overly redundant, but is this necessary? It kind of feels weird. Yeah.
I would prefer if you did. I think we're recording, so it will help us maintain the record. Thank you.
Got it. So in general, I was raised by a family that taught that engaging in your community was really important, and that if you have the ability to, you should try to give back in some way. And so I've engaged in various forms of volunteerism throughout my young life and then into my young adult life. It took a little bit of a back seat in the earlier years of my children's life. And now that they're a little bit older, I find myself with more time and more energy to engage at that level again. And I think City Council offers a really unique opportunity to work with a wide array of community members to coalesce a really intersectional vision for what we all think is important moving forward as a city of modest size, but a town of a large size, kind of.
Thank you. Councilor Menke?
Tynan, what do you think the city is doing well? And what do you think the city can do better, and how?
I think it feels like a very nice place to live. And it feels welcoming. It's accessible. It has a lot of the things that most of us would want or need without having to go somewhere else. It's just outside the kind of Portland gravitational pull, and so it feels more like an established city as opposed to kind of a bedroom or a kind of suburb as you might see in more major metropolitan areas. In terms of what the city could do better, I think that more can be done to engage and include community voices. I think something I've talked to you all about in the past and something I continue to feel is there can be more of a conversation with city council members, and I think that could be really valuable. I think that there are voices in the community that potentially do not have as many means, that do not get as large a piece of the pie as business owners and downtown association members. I think we have seen that over the course of the past few years in, like many communities across the country, in dealing with a housing crisis. And I think that there could be more urgency when it comes to these sorts of situations. I do have relatively strong opinions when it comes to the budget and police funding specifically. I think that less money should go into that, and that could free up money to go other places. In lieu of that, I also think that there could be, again, perhaps more urgency when dealing with things like climate resiliency, affordable housing, mental health accessibility, and yeah, those are a few.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council President Garvin.
Tynan, thanks for putting your app in. It's great to see you tonight.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Adam.
There are 7 city council positions, including the mayor's position, and there's a lot of debate and shared decision-making up here on the dais. Can you tell us about a time when you've had to find a solution with someone you disagreed with? Or how have you dealt with conflicts, for example, with a coworker or a neighbor?
Sure, yeah. So can give a lot of examples of that. I think in my application, I listed my time at Tryon Life Community Farm, and that was a consensus-based community decision-making organization. And so while I know that's not exactly how this group makes decisions, it was a very important model to educate myself on in terms of how do we have a situation where we can all come to agreement on something, how do we give voices to people's concerns, how do we create a space where everyone feels comfortable speaking to their concerns, even though, I think oftentimes people have concerns and they don't feel comfortable voicing them. And so how can we make a situation in an environment where everyone feels like their voice is welcome and their concerns are valid? So consensus decision-making would be one part of that, and I definitely, I did not agree with everyone that I live with. We had very different opinions when it came to enacting our shared vision towards building a nonprofit and fundraising and what we were going to do with the land and how we were going to engage with the city and how we were going to engage with the state and how we were going to engage with the county and how we were going to engage with the state park. And it was really educational. We had experts come in and give us training on facilitation and conflict resolution. And I also took courses in conflict resolution at Portland State University. And that was, again, an opportunity to really have a wider appreciation for working through things that can seem impassable, but that oftentimes there's more shared ground between us. And deciding whether or not the differences of opinion are worth a true battle, or if it's something that we can strive to understand what our actual common ground is so we can move forward for the betterment of the larger vision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Gary.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Tynan, thanks for your time tonight. Nice bike.
Thank you.
City councilors are meant to put their personal priorities and values second, behind the interests of their ward and the city as a whole. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to set aside your personal preferences for the interests of others?
Yeah, sure. Seems like I'm going to try to pick different parts of my life so it doesn't all feel like it's coming from the same place. So I was also a special projects manager and assistant director for a preschool and early education center in Southeast Portland. And I was there for about 7 years. And that organization's also a nonprofit. And I had my own very strong views on education and how I think a classroom could really look and how education can feel for children and for the families at large. And it didn't always come together with the rest of the people that I was working with. And so there were definitely times where my own goals for this school were put on a back burner to make sure that the larger voice within the community of either teachers or parents and were the ones that actually happened. If I was the minority voice in this situation, I saw as my responsibility not to push my views onto the rest of the community, but to help facilitate their views instead. And so, again, that was a really educational opportunity for me. And it was at a time when the school was really growing and we were doubling occupancy and there was a lot of engagement with the larger community. And it was a really special time to learn how to control my own urges to push personal agendas and also listen to larger community.
Thank you. Councilor Chenoweth.
Thank you, Tynan, for putting in an application. We have 6 really good applicants.
That's great.
We're in good shape. Thank you very much for doing that.
You're welcome.
City council members are always tackling budget and spending issues for the city of McMinnville. Tell me about a time where you navigated a budget issue and what was the solution to that issue?
Sure. So in my current job, I am responsible for writing the budget for the company that I work for. And I don't want to like violate any NDAs, but it's less than $3 million and it's more than $1 million. So it's, you know, a decent sized budget for a modest sized company. And it's been a great opportunity to learn what areas are really important to invest in and what investments should we take more gradually so that they can come to fruition over the course of the next few years. What things need to be shifted around so we can deal with sudden things that come up in the months and times that we don't plan for. And so in this situation, again, it's an opportunity for my own goals and values of what I think a budget should reflect, and then also making sure that it addresses the company's values and also the needs of the workers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any questions for us?
I mean, quite a few, but in this situation specifically, I would say, what are you all looking for? Because this is a relatively unique environment where there's not an election for a seat, and instead it's an opportunity for, I think, just the 6 of you, right? Is there like a tiebreaker that comes in if there's a tie? Oh, it's cool, great. So yeah, I guess that would be the question back to you would be what is it that you're looking for?
All right, and Councillor Menke, I see your hand is up. Would you like to start?
Sure. Unfortunately, it just went out of my head. Give me a second here. We're looking for someone who can work with us, not necessarily agree with us on everything, but is willing to be civil, is willing to realize that when the majority opinion has occurred, that they will support the rest of us. Maybe not happily, but they will support us. So, and vice versa, we will support you if your opinion is the one that is the ruling one. So, at least from my perspective, there is a lot of self-sacrifice in this. I don't really think about it that much, but there's a lot of hours involved, a lot of work involved, and you have to be willing to work with the other people. I think that's important. Civility is extremely important.
Thank you.
For what it's worth.
Are there any other councillors that would like to answer the question? Councillor Gary?
Perhaps it's just another way to say what has already been said, but for me, my decision will rest a lot in not looking heavily at the applicants, but more looking heavily at what we already have and how we can better represent the community as a whole by adding a person to that, while only a small time, right? It's sort of taking stock of what we have and who we have and the voices and the reasons why, and you know what ingredient is missing in the pantry, and is that in front of us here tonight? And so that's kind of the biggest thing I'm wrestling with right now. I think, you know, humility, civility are great for even the temporary nature or whoever joins us permanently, as well as sort of a courage to ask questions and a humility to take the answers. So.
Thank you. Any other councillors like to add on?
Could I ask one more question?
Go ahead, Kelly.
I'm just curious, Tynan, I mean, are you planning to run after this? Because this is not for the next 2 years. This is just a fairly short period of time. And are you expecting to run?
As yet, undecided.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back to councillor questions, starting with Council President Garvin.
I just wanted to second what Zach said. When I look at this appointment process and the short window that counselor has to operate in, I hope whoever does get appointed is looking to fulfill a term after their appointment through the election process, and that they are the missing ingredient that's up here, and it gives us more perspective for the city policy as a whole moving forward, and we're not just getting redundancy up here on the dais.
Thank you. And Councillor Chenoweth?
I wish that question by Kelly Menke had been asked of the 2 previous applicants. I'd like that question to be asked of all of the applicants. I'm looking for somebody who has a passion for the job. You know, somebody who is not just going to fill for the next few months. You know, we put a lot of time and effort into this interview process. Obviously, I can't predict the outcome of an election, but I'd like to see somebody who's got the passion that I know they're going to be interested in it in the fall, and has a passion and love for the city. You know, in terms of whether they fit a hole, I think that's a very good point that Zach brings up. But to me, it's more important that they actually are doing this for the right reasons. So I'm looking for them trying to ferret out of their answers their motive for why they're running. Is it a passion for the city? Is it a political agenda? What is it?
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. We'll be deliberating this evening, most likely coming to a conclusion, but if not, then we'll conclude on the 28th. And Claudia will be in touch with you in advance of that. And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you all for your time as well.
Yeah, let's go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I think she must be from the... No candidates are allowed. So maybe she is just right. Yeah, I guess, yeah. We didn't declare, I mean, we didn't ask anybody to leave other than the candidate. But I don't know if it's... Good evening, how are you, Mr. Smith?
I'm doing great, how are you?
Well, thank you. We have your application in front of us, and each counselor will be going around and asking you a question. But in addition, will you give us a small introduction of yourself before we begin?
Yeah, my name is Richard Smith. I am the owner of the Velvet Monkey Tea Shop down on 3rd Street, just a couple blocks away. I've lived in Mcminnville since I was 10 years old, and I really love this community.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councilor Peralta.
Richard, welcome, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, too.
Thank you for your business.
Yeah.
Councilor Peralta.
I know, nobody can hear me on Zoom. I apologize to everybody on Zoom for not speaking directly into the mic. I've never used Zoom before, so. Okay, so. So why are you interested in the position, and what experience and skills will you bring to the role?
Yeah, so I'm interested in the position because, frankly and foremost, I really love Mcminnville, and I really love this community, and I've loved it for a long time. Like I said, I've lived here since I was 10 years old, but I had a chance in my adult life to move back to where I was born, and I chose to live here. And I really love watching the city grow. And for a while, I worked at the Atticus Hotel, and seeing people come from around the country and from around the world to see this community for the first time and see that in their eyes, it's this idyllic town, really made me love it that much more. And so what I hope to bring to the table is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know that I really have a deep love for Mcminnville, and I want to be able to bring that. I want to be able to bring that here.
Thank you. And Councilor Menke.
Okay, what do you think the city is doing well, and what do you think the city can do better, and how? And we're thrilled to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so what I think the city is doing really well is I think the city has a really great and fantastic support network for businesses, not just on 3rd Street, but all around town. I think we saw that a lot with COVID. A lot of the businesses here managed to not only weather the storm, but managed to actually do fairly well for themselves. I took over the Velvet Monkey pretty much in the height of COVID, and they're, I mean, like Dine Outside and all that, Visit Mcminnville. There's all these great support networks throughout the city that really make it easy to do business here.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, and as for the second part of that question, what would I like to see the city do better? I think that it really comes down to like the livability of the city in terms of housing prices and rent prices. It is a very difficult city to find housing in, and it is something that I have struggled with a lot. I really love this town and I wish to stay here, but it is difficult to find housing that is a reasonable price.
Thank you. Council President Garvin.
There are 7 positions, including the mayor position. There's a lot of debate and shared decision-making up here on the dais. Can you tell us about a time when you had to find a solution with someone you disagreed with, or how you've dealt with conflicts in the past, for example, with coworkers or a neighbor?
Yeah, so a previous job I had was I was a car salesman for Phil Doran down at the Volkswagen dealership here in town. And I think an aspect of that job that doesn't get talked about a lot is the fact that as a car salesman, it's thought of a lot of as like the customer to the salesman kind of relationship. But there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in terms of the salesman and their coworkers. You share this like pseudo-adversarial relationship with one another. Like you're still working towards the same goal, but you're also working against each other because you're almost like in business for yourself at that point. So there was a lot of like compromises we had to find, such as if 2 people have interacted with one customer, how does that work in terms of who gets credit for the sale, since it was a commission-based job. And so a lot of what I would have to do in that job was work with my coworkers, find equitable solutions that would work for us both, keep us both happy, make us both happy to see each other every day still, and keep everyone friends and working together and working towards making the business run better.
Thank you. Councilor Geary.
Thank you, Richard, for your time tonight. City councilors are meant to put their personal priorities and values second, behind the interests of their ward and the city as a whole. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to set aside your personal preferences for the interests of others?
Yeah, so I think there's an incident that happened very recently that is very near to my heart that has happened that I'd like to talk about. I had a dog up until very recently named Remus, and Remus was a special needs dog in the sense that he was very aggressive. He had a reactive condition. We talked with multiple vets. We talked with multiple trainers. He was incapable of really having any sort of distinguishment between what was actually a threat and what wasn't a threat. And I loved this dog with all my heart, and he was my best friend. But he was, frankly, a danger to not just the people in my house, but the community and the people who lived around us. So we were, after after years of trying to find trainers for Remus and talking to different vets about different medical solutions, we did eventually have to make the sad decision to euthanize him. And while we really didn't want to, there was a very imminent danger that he could have hurt someone. So that was a decision that we had to make for the benefit of the people around us, despite the personal pain it brought us.
Thank you. Councilor Chenoweth.
I'm sorry you had to go through that. Thank you for filling out an application. We had 6 of them. All of you are good candidates, so thank you very much for doing so.
Thank you for saying that.
City council members are always tackling budget and spending issues for the city of McMinnville. Tell me about a time when you navigated a budget issue and what idea solved that issue.
So yeah, right now, a lot of the daily work we do at the Velvet Monkey is just managing our budget with supply chain issues and just rising cost for everything. We've been having to try to keep our prices down because we want to be not only competitive, but because we want to make ourselves we want to make sure our prices are appealing to the community that we live in, but we're also having to deal with the fact that all of our suppliers are raising their costs. So there's been a lot of budget balancing going on lately and trying to find where we can raise prices in areas that are reasonable and where we might be able to make money one way so that we can keep prices down in another way. So raising price on one type of item so we might be able to keep it down on another type of item. And that has been a lot of what we've been having to do lately. Recently, a very specific solution has been raising ever so slightly the price of some of our bulk items so that we can keep down individual retail items.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I guess my only question for you is individually, what would you all say is the hardest part of the job that you do here?
Would anybody like to respond? Councillor Gary.
Patience.
Fair enough.
I've never been accused of being a patient person, and I get really excited about things and want to do it. I'm also professionally in the construction industry, and so while those don't go monumentally quick, I have a certain ability to accomplish things right away, and moving at a slower pace than I'd like is a constant reminder to continue to be patient. So that's mine.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors? Councillor Chenoweth?
Yeah, I would say for me, the hardest thing is balancing some of the, as you learn what everything that is happening within the city, and you find something that grabs your passion, that you're focused on, that you're wanting to see through, balancing other commitments that I have with the passion and desire to see that go through. I would say that's probably is one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else care to respond at this time? No? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Menke, I'm sorry.
Well, I actually want to ask a question. Is that all right?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Richard, given your interview tonight, you know this is only for a couple of months until the election process occurs. Are you going to run in the election?
I'll be honest, I haven't really thought that far ahead. I've thought about it a little bit. I would very much love to. I think that'd be something I could really pour my heart and soul into. However, I just thought, trying to take it one step at a time, because if you guys do decide to go with a different candidate, I don't want to have my whole, campaign planned out. So.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Maybe you should. Thank you.
Thank you.
Honest answer.
Thank you. So the council most likely will be coming to a decision tonight, which then the appointment would happen on the June 28th meeting. There is a small chance that deliberations could continue over until that meeting. Either way, Claudia will be in touch before that time, and thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. And we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Bag this big.
Chris was trying to attend.
This is Adam's dressed up look.
Hey, Chris.
I like it. It looks good on you.
Joya scheduled the last one for them.
Just under 1 minute.
So it's going to be next month.
Yeah, so it's like 7 a.m.
It is 7:27, so we'll resume our interviews. And Mr. Reimer, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have your application in front of us. Each of the counselors will be asking you a question. But in order to get started, I was hoping you would just give us an introduction of yourself.
Oh, my pleasure. Good evening. My name is Raymond Reimer. I love this town. I've been a part of this town for many years. I actually did service in this town over the years, and it's a great place to be. I've been in business for over 25 years. I have a service-based business. I also have a furniture store online, and it's a great place to be a part. Community here in Mcminnville is unlike any other place I've ever been before, and I'm honored to be considered a resident here. I do live here down on 3rd, and I'm involved as in many things as I can be, and I think this is just a great opportunity to give back, per se.
Thank you. Counselor Peralta.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome, Ray. And thanks for your work in the community. So can you tell us why you're interested in the position and what experience and skills you bring to the role?
For sure. So over the years, I've served in many different committees, boards, projects over the years. And to be completely honest with you, I've been in many other municipalities over the years with my business, been doing it for 25 years. And Mcminnville sets themselves apart of everybody else. I grew up in the Seattle area, went to college there, and I was involved in my community. And I moved to a small town into the Medford-Ashland area and was involved in my community. When it came to Mcminnville, it was unlike anything else. I was actually a diver at the time. I was doing some work with Mac Water and Light, and I realized the system here was by far one of the best I'd ever seen, and I've been in thousands of reservoirs. And lo and behold, I met a young banker that ended up being my wife, and the rest of history is made. And so I feel it's important to give back. And I feel like as my business, I'm a problem solver. And every single day, that's what we talk about. We look at hard topics, we come up with solutions, and then you work with other parties to see how can you come up with a resolution. And I feel I would love to have that opportunity to do that here with this amazing town.
Thank you very much. Counselor Menke.
Raymond, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. My question for you is, what do you think the city is doing well? And what do you think they could do better? And how do you think they could do it better, please?
I think that's a great question. One thing that Mcminnville is truly doing better is if you talk to other parts of the area, I do a lot of traveling for work off and on, and everybody's like, wow, you're from Mcminnville, that's amazing. What a great town. And I do know many other people over the years, I've talked to other municipalities, they're like, Mcminnville, we've copied them. You know, my son went to, private school in Corvallis for many years, and his bus driver was the mayor of Amity, and we would have conversations about everybody's wanting to copy what Mcminnville is doing. And that's really huge to say for a municipality like Mcminnville, for everybody to be looking here. Salem, I've heard, has looked here. The small towns around us are looking here. And you set the bar high, and I think that should be something to be very proud of. And so as far as things of improvement, obviously we're going through some growth, right? And we forecast that growth happening. I admire every single one of you guys to listen and to hear people's concerns about that, whether it's from water to economic and reaching out the housing issues that we're addressing. Those are very challenging tasks. And another thing that I'm passionate about is mentorship and bridging the gap to the next generation. I think it's important that we give opportunities for young graduates and things, or college graduates, to be able to put their hand at work and get involved in what the city is doing. And there's so many ways to do that, and it's just a matter of brainstorming and thinking outside of the box, and I would be willing to, maybe bring some of those ideas to the table.
Thank you. Council President Garvin.
Ray, thanks for making the application. There are 7 city council positions, including the mayor position, and there's a lot of debate and shared decision-making. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to find a solution with someone you disagreed with, or how have you dealt with conflicts with a coworker or a neighbor?
So in my line of work, I own a furniture restoration company. We deal with the manufacturers, we deal with the customers, and we deal with the retailer stores. And we are the liaison to balance the problems. And trust me, there are a lot of problems every single day. And so whether you're getting the fight, you're getting, a really hot individual from one case to the other, I take a lot of pride in just remaining calm, listening to both sides, and coming up with the solution that everybody is involved. Also, in 2015, I was part of the Leadership MAC committee and the group, and we set up to find a need in our community and then put together a program to answer the problems that were happening. And at that time, there was many things that were brought to the table, and we decided that the homeless community, or people that needed food and things, was the Barnabas Soup Kitchen desperately needed a new kitchen. And so I kind of helped head a part of that process and actually putting a crowdfunding event together, and we raised over $40,000 for that event. Now, there were a lot of opinions and there was a lot of input, but it was a matter of finding the leadership there to be able to balance all of those plates and actually get a good end result at the end. And so it was very rewarding. It was an amazing accomplishment from a bunch of volunteers with our city. I really feel I kind of feed off solving those kind of problems. It's my everyday life. And I take it as a challenge, and it's very rewarding when it all comes together.
Thank you very much. Councilor Geary.
Raymond, thank you for your time tonight. City councilors are meant to put their personal priorities and values second, behind the interests of their ward and the city as a whole. Can you tell us about a time when you have had to set aside your personal preferences for the interests of others?
Well, it can be challenging sometimes in business. If you've been in business for any period of time, you have these dips and you have these valleys. And I can distinctly remember from 2005 to 2008, furniture wasn't the best business to be in, to be completely honest with you. And during that time, I had to ebb and flow, a part of giving everything I have. And I had to step up to that plate and carry the business almost single-handedly, taking me away from family, taking me away from groups, taking me away from everything to make sure I put everything forward. And sometimes when you believe in something, it's easy. I believe in this town. I believe in what you guys are accomplishing. And it's easy to kind of, when you do have faith in something like that, to step aside, put things aside, and put it on the calendar. I'm big about the calendar, man. If it's on the calendar, it happens. If meetings need to happen, they happen, because it's a priority. And so that's just, hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And Councilor Chenoweth.
Raymond, thank you for making application. And, we had 6 different applicants. All of them were good. So thank you very much for doing that. City council members are always tackling budget and spending issues for the city of McMinnville. Tell me about a time you navigated a budget issue and what idea solved that issue.
Like I've mentioned in the past, I've sat on many different boards and councils and other programs over the years, and sometimes it's hard to make the difficult sacrifices that are needed to be made when it comes to finances. But business, it's all about the dollar bill. It's all about where you need to allocate the funding, where you need to allocate everything. And when you're in different programs, I remember we were doing a building project in the Mount Lake Terrace area. Gosh, this was in 2004 or 5. I was a young kid venturing into these, and I learned so much through that process. I learned what not to do and what to do. But I'll never forget the time sitting on the committee, and they were talking about buying this lot on a balloon payment. And I was young and dumb, didn't really have that much experience. I was like 24, 25 years old. But I'll never forget the experience of learning, of listening to everybody else and having to make those difficult decisions at that time. And we came up with the resolution not to go with that balloon payment. And we had some investors come along the play to go about that route. And if we avoided a train wreck from happening in that situation. So I feel it's always about coming to the table and coming to a place of, let's hear everybody's voice, let's look at the pros and the cons, and then present everything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have questions for us?
I do. First of all, I admire every single one of you guys for doing what you do. It takes a lot of time and energy, but the one question I want to hear from each one of you is, in the process of doing this, what is the one thing that has happened while you've been sitting here, not today, but overall, that made you walk away and go, this is why I do it? Like, this is my why. And there's reasons, there's ups and there's downs, but there's got to be those highs. And I'd like to know, what is the one thing that sticks out to you that is a high, is why you do this today?
Are there any counselors that would like to respond to that question? Counselor Menke?
Within the last year, the city was awarded $1.5 million for a navigation center. We've been working for a long time to get funding because we don't receive CBDG funds on a regular basis like some cities do that are over 50,000. So to receive these dollars with the assistance of our representative, Ron Noble, and a lot of enthusiastic people that testified for it, was just magnificent. That, and to be able to actually help the Housing Authority get some matching funds so that they too could go out and get funding for affordable housing are two of the high points for me recently. And it just really does make all the difference in the world to see something come together finally.
Thank you. Other counselors that would like to respond?
I'm not really a person who clings to high points very much, but it is very rewarding when we have opportunities to solve persistent long-term problems. All of us, by virtue of being on this council, sit on other boards that provide services. And in the last year, I've been able to do a lot of work helping people get rehoused in the Santiam Canyon after getting burned out of their homes. And putting those communities back together is very rewarding, helping with it anyway.
That's awesome.
Other counselors? Counselor Gary?
I would say mine would be the participation and completion in the MacPac process, and that is only a plan, but I think that typifies sort of what I'm hoping to do is create a better place for my son to grow up in, and he's 5.5, and I would come home and talk to him about what we talked about that night, and I would get his input, and I'm still hoping we can get a hot tub that has a rainbow-colored pool. I'm still working on how to figure that out. That was his big input. But I think that just that process and just sort of typifies whether I'm here for 4 years or 8 years or more to use that time to make a difference both in the short, medium, and long term is pretty impactful.
That is.
Thank you. Councillor Chenoweth.
How did you know I wanted to say something? You know, it's a great question, and I've only been here a year and a half, and this is going to sound odd, but there have been several issues that, from many people's perspective, would be little issues, but to the person whose door that I went to, like I sat down with a couple over a cup of coffee to talk about a rat issue they were having. That was, as I talked to them and they shared with me what they were experiencing, and I tried to find a solution for them. I don't think I did, but I tried. That's why I'm doing this. It's for the citizens, the residents, and there's going to be a big project that later I'll be able to tag my hat on that I said this was it, but mostly it's those little interactions, the little help of somebody that needs help that I'm able to help with it. I think that's why I'm doing it.
Awesome.
Council President Garvin, did you want to answer also?
Yeah, I'll do it in two parts. So my first term, the thing that really stuck out to me was one of the reasons I ran at the time was due to behavior issues that we had in this downtown core. And shortly after getting elected in 2016, we formed a task force, and it had a wide range of citizens and business owners and houseless people and people of every background and staff members alike, and the ability of us to work together to one common goal and actually look for a solution, and not just something that said, hey, we had policy, but something that was actually going to work. And the outcome of that task force, when it was all said and done, got that solution, and it changed the behaviors in this downtown area. But it wasn't the outcome that I thought would have got us there, or I don't think any of the other members when we first started those meetings. And so just that cohesive effort of everybody coming from different angles and coming up with a solution that worked for everybody. Currently, it just happened last night, but you know, for really since I was a volunteer firefighter in 2005, I've been hearing about consolidation. And last night, the rural board voted 4-0 to move forward with putting that to the voters and forming a new fire district with the city of Mcminnville and the rural fire district to be one new district of their own. So that's kind of the torch that I hope to carry across the finish line in this term.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I'm going to let the conversation end on that very high point for everybody. Thank you. Thank you very.
One more question, Remy.
Oh yes, Councillor Menke, please.
Win, lose, draw, whatever happens tonight, are you willing to run in the next election for this seat?
Very, very likely. But I'm not going to say indefinitely one way or the other, but I mean, it's something I've been entertaining for quite a few years. So, and I do intend, my schedule over the years has been our business has been going through growing pains over the last couple of years. So, but I intend on being a lot more involved going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The council will deliberate tonight and most likely come to a decision. There's a chance deliberations will continue on to the next meeting. However, the appointment will happen at the next meeting regardless. That'll be on June 28th, and Claudia will be in contact in advance of that time to let you know the council's decision. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys later.
Yes, we are a little bit ahead of schedule, yes.
45 minutes ahead of
That's
schedule,
right.
you guys.
What's that?
We're 45 minutes ahead of schedule. Do you have a way to reach her and let her know that we're so far ahead?
I did ask every applicant to be here at least half an hour early, but I can send her an email and see if she's available or give her a call.
Than you anticipated needing to be here. We were running a little ahead of schedule. Each of the counselors will be asking you a question, and what we would love is if you would just start by introducing yourself.
Okay. I am Jessica Payne. I have been in Mcminnville since 1987. Before that, my family lived on our family's homestead not just outside, about 12 miles outside of Yamhill, so a beat away. And I've always volunteered and took a break last year, and it's like a good opportunity to re-engage.
Wonderful, thank you. Councilor Peralta.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you and welcome. Glad you're here tonight. So can you tell us why you're interested in the position and what experience and skills you'll bring with you to the role?
Yes, thank you. Since I became self-employed in 2006, it felt like a really good opportunity with the schedule flexibility to just get engaged, and I've served on a variety of boards since then. And it feels like since then, every volunteer role I've had has sort of advanced me to the next and the next and so on. I feel like probably the Yamhill County Association of Realtors board positions as treasurer and board chair, and Yamhill County Court-Appointed Special Advocates, or CASA, as well as the training to be a mediator, which I served as a mediator for your community mediators doing small claims mediations, is probably the most valuable experience and skill set. It was a really, both CASA and YCAR were really diverse groups of people, which has a tremendous amount of value for the group that you're the board for, because it feels like everybody really gets a say. You know, there's a input for virtually a large population, I guess, and then the mediation skills have had value in every area of my life, including dealing with a preschooler.
Thank you. Councilor Menke.
You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Jessica, glad you're here tonight. What do you think the city is doing well? And what do you think the city could do better? And how do you think they could do it better?
There's a very long list of what the city, I feel like, is doing well. I think.
Give us your top three.
Right now, probably my favorite thing is the community engagement efforts that are going on for particularly the 3rd Street development project. I feel like anybody who lives here, you know, like it's just a great place to go for a stroll, right? So if you want to see the beauty of it, participate in it. But I just really value the effort, and it takes a lot, I'm sure, to get the community engagement really rallied. The second one would be the 3-mile lane, like that area work. It feels like that's sort of been on the radar for a couple decades, and it's really exciting that it's happening, or closer to happening. I mean, you realize you can't snap your fingers and it'll happen. And then, of course, seeking sources of sustainable funding is critical. So, and as a fire wife, I'm gonna throw in the fire district. I'm a supporter of that. And then what can
now for the dark side.
Now to the dark side. I wouldn't call it the dark side. Everywhere or everyone can use improvement, right? My job as a realtor, I guess, makes code compliance more front and center for me. In maybe more so in terms of how it relates to safety, lots of sidewalk stuff, like overgrown sidewalk type things, and rats. Unfortunately, I have a neighbor who really loves to feed squirrels peanuts. And that also, rats apparently also like peanuts. And there is kind of this, I guess, space that's kind of nagging me. It's on Villard. Once upon a time, it was known as, I think, Village Mill Park, and it's a gravel pit. And I would really love for that to be reimagined. So I think I don't know the how, unfortunately. It's not appropriate for it to be another park, given that Thompson Park is a stone's throw away. But watching it sit there is kind of devastating, especially to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Council President Garvin.
Jessica, thanks for taking the time to put in an application. Many great candidates tonight, and we've asked them all similar questions. So my question for this evening is, there are 7 city council positions, including the mayor position, and there is a lot of debate and shared decision making. Can you tell us about a time when you've had to find a solution with someone you disagreed with, or how you have dealt with conflicts, for example, with a coworker or a neighbor?
Every day with a teenager and a preschooler. In all seriousness, I'd like to rephrase. I prefer deliberation or productive dialogue, because I feel like that's how conflict, especially on the council, should be. It should be an opportunity to learn and educate and inform. It's not a sales opportunity, of course, necessarily to pull somebody over to the other side, but in that, a learning opportunity. And maybe organically, it does create somebody to re-examine their view. An example, probably the best example would be when I was serving on the board of CASA, which serves children and youth in Oregon Department of Human Services foster care, was we were excited, most of us were excited about putting up a Progress Pride flag. Not as a political statement, but rather an indicator to children and youth in the community that it was a safe place to come, to be, to disclose. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty things of the things they get to disclose, but just that it was a safe place. And it took the conversation about that on our board, took a really odd turn, and it did become very political, and we had to take a break. The solution was just taking a break, everybody dispersing for a few minutes, a breather, get a drink of water, whatever, and then reconvening in 15 minutes. And ultimately, the person who initially was not interested, it was important to us too that all board members agreed, because as stakeholders of child welfare, we felt like it was important for everybody to be able to answer the question, why do you feel comfortable hanging this? And so we felt like it was really important that we all agree, that we all be on the same page. And we all came back to the table together with an understanding of one another's view and decided to hang the flag, and drafted a script of sorts that everybody felt comfortable sharing, that they didn't feel would violate their own political standings or preferences, but that was really just about kids and providing a safe space.
Thank you. Councillor Gary?
Good evening. City councilors are meant to put their personal priorities and values second, behind the interests of their ward and the city as a whole. Can you tell us about a time when you've had to set aside your personal preferences for the interests of others?
On the Citizen Review Board, which I served on for 9 years, it's a division of the Oregon Judicial Department, which reviews cases of children in foster care also, but we're appointed by judges. Quasi-judicial process that we make determinations on whether children are provided the services necessary to return home, that they're safe, they're protected, that their well-being is being maintained by the foster parents, and that DHS is providing appropriate services to the parents to make it possible for children to safely return home. And oftentimes, that was a really hard decision because it doesn't feel like it's always in the best interest for children to return home. But the reality is parents have rights. And just because I don't like the situation or I don't agree with the quote unquote minimum sufficient level of care, which is the standard, doesn't change that the law is the law. So we had to make findings based on what the law or the statute was, independent of what my preference would be, which is to have a 40-bedroom home and take all the children.
Thank you. Councilor Chenoweth.
Well, thank you for putting in an application. We had 6 applicants. All of them are good. So thank you very much for doing that. My question is, city council members are always tackling budget and spending issues for the city of McMinnville. Tell me about a time you navigated a budget issue and what idea solved that issue.
I'm going to have to go back to CASA on this one. So we had, it doesn't, of course, compare to the city budget, but we had a shortfall and we just came up with a really creative solution for a really rapid fundraiser, which ended up being a mailed tea party. And we set a goal, which was really important to us, to help assess the value of the work we're doing, but of course the return on the investment. It was really, really inexpensive. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000, and we set a goal to earn about $11,000, and we got close to 14, which effectively funded one part-time-ish position, which was way more than we had really realistically thought was possible. I mean, we were hoping we needed to replace a golf tournament that we were getting like $4,000 to $5,000 a year from.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for us?
I'm curious to know what prompted each of you to the council to run or to be appointed initially, whichever. If you have the time, of course.
Would anyone who would like to answer the question to start? I'll go ahead then. Let's see, I initially began my public service. I was inspired to apply for the Planning Commission based on what was happening with the Habitat for Humanity Aspire build, and a lot of neighborhood discontent. And I was attending those meetings and then did 2 terms on Planning Commission. When I applied for the City Council, it was actually because I had a keen interest in what was happening with the airport, and I really saw that as a underutilized asset of the City of McMinnville, and was very interested in how that could shape up. As soon as I got on council, we started the McMinnville Affordable Housing, what was then Task Force and is now Commission, and so that's where most of my energy goes in terms of my committee assignments, and it certainly, it is a large body of the work that I do on behalf of the council, and it keeps me highly engaged and interested, and I'm very passionate about that work. So there's not kind of one thing, there's always this desire to serve, but if it was what was it about the city that I felt like where I could make a difference, those were kinds of the things along the way that drove me forward. Other councilors? Councilor Chenoweth?
So what initially got me going, I think I'm going to go away from the policy stuff that pushed me to run and focus more on the personal. I'd always been doing service work, mostly connected to my church, in fact, entirely connected to my church. And we had some changes take place, and I was not doing much or as much as I was doing before. Right about the same time my first grandchild was born. And for those that have grandchildren in the room, you understand that changes your perspective on life quite a bit. At least it did me. It made me stop and wonder what I had left for them and what I had done to give back to the community that I grew up in, because I grew up here in Mcminnville. And so between now I had free time, I still want the passion to serve and to help had not subsided at all. And a desire to give back to the community, prompted in large part by the birth of a beautiful grandson. That would have been the keys.
Congratulations. It's probably been a minute, but congratulations.
Councilor Gary?
Before council, I served on the planning commission, and so I was involved in city goings-ons, and in my professional life, I'm in the construction trade and sit in a project management capacity, and so having a skill set that was reading plans and understanding how to translate words and drawings on paper to, actual real projects that involve, money and expectations and multiple people's, was a good overlap, and found that it tied together what I actually went to school for, which was political science and history and economics. And so found a good natural fit. I also found a common theme in planning and concerns about growth being either being against it or for it in a way that it was taking it for face value, and I wanted to be a part of shaping the community I grew up in and in helping manage the growth where I thought it would be. Around that time I had grown our family to include our son, and so it was just an exciting and appealing time, and seemed to develop a knack for talking for a long time. Thanks.
Anyone else? It's a rough follow.
I'll take a go at it. So what initially brought me into council chambers was dispensaries, marijuana dispensaries in the city, and the process that the state laid out that the council needed to follow to enact time, place, and manner. So they would have a local taxing authority basically put an accelerated timeline on council. I didn't understand that at the time, and so all I saw was the council meets twice a month, and then all of a sudden there's these special meetings, and I felt that there were some ulterior motives there, and so I started attending council meetings very regularly, and then I've always had an interest in the airport. Since I was a little kid, I just loved watching planes land out there and take off. And so as I sat out in the crowd, there was a chance for an airport commission appointment. And so for the next couple weeks, I read over a decade worth of minutes of airport commission meetings and went for that appointment and didn't get it. Lost that to a very qualified individual who I had the opportunity to serve on the airport commission with as a council liaison, and respected him and his opinions very greatly. And so then 2016 rolled around. There was some downtown behavior issues that didn't seem like they were getting much traction, and it was kind of at a stone wall, and I felt that I could bridge the gap between the business community and the church community, and try and make some progress on that. And the other side of that coin is public safety. We had a lot of burnout at the police department at the time. I had sat in council meetings with a citizen and heard detectives testify about their caseload and their burnout. Fire department staff testify about their call volume that had went through the roof, and they were still using the same amount of apparatus to service those calls and the amount of move-ups. And so those were, the three things that I campaigned on initially. I've always had a keen interest in politics, initially at the federal level, realizing that my checkbook will never be that big. I went to the state level, and I spent some time over at the state with some cannabis policy, and realized that if I really want to make a change and have an effect on where my kids get to grow up, city council is the place to do it. And so I ran for council in 2016.
Thank you. Kelly, do you want to ask your follow-up question?
Sure. Jessica, win, lose, or draw, depending on what happens tonight, are you willing to run in the upcoming election
Yes.
for this position?
Did I answer too quickly? Yes.
Okay, well, hey, I appreciate the enthusiasm. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time tonight. The council is now going to go into deliberations. Most likely we'll make a decision tonight. There's a chance deliberations will continue to the June 28th meeting. An appointment will happen at the June 28th meeting, and Claudia will be in touch in advance of that to let you know the decision of the council. Thank you very much for coming in and your time, and thank you for adapting your time to our time. We appreciate that as well.
Of course. Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, the council will have the opportunity to deliberate on the applicants. We are scheduled to make an appointment later this evening, but if we can't come to a consensus and need more time to deliberate, we can continue deliberations and appointments to the Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 regular city council meetings. The new appointee will be sworn in at the Tuesday, June 28th meeting as well. Definitely want to make sure that all the councilors have a chance to talk before we move into making any motions and express their thoughts. So if we could do that as a group, that would be wonderful. And I think we can just go around the table. We'll end with Council President Garvin. Kelly, may we start with you since you're on Zoom?
Okay. I thought we had very good candidates tonight. I was really impressed. I have really debated with myself how much I want to say on this particular topic because I hate to put anyone down. But I am extremely concerned about Mark Davis as a candidate for this position. He has worked with others for the last 20 years to stop an urban growth boundary. He's sued the city at least once on his own and in tandem with others. There were comments tonight that I thought were interesting when he was talking about answering my question, how he said that, Mcminnville's really good about being a small town, but now they need to get some real professionals. He's constantly caustic and putting down our staff, and that seriously worries me more than almost anything else. I don't think I can handle that. It's subtle, I will give it that. It is subtle. I thought he was quite evasive on his responses in a number of other areas. So even though there are times that I do agree with Mark, and I do appreciate the fact that he's been put in some very difficult positions. I can think of one at YCAP that I was also involved in a number of years ago. He just, in my opinion, is probably not the best candidate in this particular situation. And I, again, apologize for being negative about any particular candidate. I really don't like to be. But I am concerned about this.
On the flip side of that, before we move on, do you have a leading or a few leading candidates?
I was particularly impressed with Scott and with Raymond's interviews. And actually, Jessica, I thought did pretty good too.
Thank you. Councilor Chenoweth?
Well, interestingly, the top three for me would be the three that were just cited. Cunningham, Raymond, and Jessica. I look at Mark Davis. I agree with you. I don't know that he'd make a very good counselor, but I really like him in the audience. As much as he's kind of a pain in the neck, I like him out there. He brings stuff to us that we might miss. He's like a seventh counselor, only he doesn't get to vote. And I kind of like that. And I'd hate to lose that if we ended up with him. That would be my take on Mark.
I think we'll lose him, but I agree. I mean, there are things I really like about Mark. I'll just be honest about it. There have been times that he's definitely spoke to me. So it's not all negative, but it's just concerns me.
Yeah, I mean, often I don't agree with him, but I really appreciate what he brings to the table. He does his homework.
He does.
So I'm kind of those top
But
three.
I'm not sure he's doing his homework in our favor is the problem.
So I'm in agreement with her top three, and we can discuss more as I hear where everybody else is at.
Thank you. Councilor Gary?
As I mentioned in my response to one of the applicant's questions on what we were looking for, I sort of look at less measuring one candidate against the other candidates and more measuring all the candidates against us and finding out where our gaps are, what we don't have here, what's not or underrepresented. To that point, I think Richard Smith jumped out at me in that he represents a lot of what we don't have. I think his youth and his engagement in different areas of the city, and he would bring a different perspective that I don't think is seen here with some of the other candidates. I think some of the other ones are from a similar-ish pool or group of people. I would add my zeroing in on Scott to that. I think Scott is a good candidate for the job, and I think Tynan has always, to me, represented and brought some good and interesting and diverse perspectives to the conversation. So I think those three would be my initial top three, which seems to be the exercise we are doing.
Thank you. Councilor Peralta?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'm a little surprised by some of the comments.
I can't hear you, Scott.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm a little surprised by some of the comments. I agree with Kelly that Mark has been critical of different aspects of city government, but I've never seen him be rude or disrespectful to anybody on the board, including our staff. I didn't find his comments today to be in any way evasive. And when I look at the qualifications for the position, Mark attends every city council meeting, he attends every planning commission meeting, he attends every Mac Water and Light Commission meeting. Chris mentioned those things as passion and motivations for the job as being things that he's looking for. I don't think anybody can say that Mark is not doing that for purely public interested reasons. Zach mentioned filling holes on the council. I mean, we do have a CPA, but Mark has an education as a public accountant, professional experience with affordable housing. He was the driving force behind the most significant affordable housing project that we've had in this community since I've lived here. During the time that I've been on council, he has identified $850,000 in underpayments from Mac Water and Light to this city. He was the person who brought forward the changes that we made this year to the pilot to move Cascade Steel to 6% from 3%. So I think that I agree. He's like having an extra counselor, and I think he has more than earned the position by virtue of his work over decades throughout the community. And by virtue of the work that he's done specifically to the core of the job. I think we need people who are critical of our institution on this board. What are we missing on the board? More voices to take a scalpel to our organization, in my opinion. And I don't think there's anybody more qualified to do that. When we look at public policies and sort of the values that I think he brings to the table, I agree. He is less favorable to growth than maybe some other people, but I think that that's reflective of our community's values to a significant extent.
Well, I do think
So
that
excuse me, Kelly.
Hold on, Kelly. Hold on.
I have the floor right now, not you. So I think that he is a standout. The other person that I thought was a standout tonight is Scott. And again, by virtue of the public service that he's done for our community and the virtue of the businesses that he's run downtown. He is one of the icons that makes Mcminnville a great place to come visit and would be a wonderful addition to this board. Any of these people would be good additions to the board, but by virtue of the people who have actually been showing up and been doing the work, I would have a hard time picking somebody who hasn't put in that same level of commitment and work. So that's my perspective.
Thank you. And Council President Garvin.
Sal, do you have a third person that you're interested in, or just leave it at those two?
I think those two were pretty standout for me relative to the rest of the field.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, lots of great comments tonight, really great candidates. You know, when you look at the candidates in their own merit, I agree with a lot of what Sal just said about Mark Davis, and that he does do his homework, and he's been here as long as I've been here, attending meetings, and I think he's probably attends more meetings than some counselors have that have sat up here over the years. So I mean, he's definitely put his time in, but I really do enjoy Mark out in the crowd, and I enjoy the comments he makes and the homework he does and the latitude he has to interact with constituents when we're in quasi-judicial moments and we can't have those conversations, and the perspective he can bring to the table from being out in the crowd. My other concern... Huh? Scott, I think Scott interviewed very well. My concern with Scott is the redundancy that would be here up on the board or on the council on the dais. I think Scott is just more of what we have. I really like Scott as a person, and I think he'd be a great counselor. I just don't know if adding more of what we have is going to make the best policy moving forward. I thought as far as the interviewers go and the conversation that was had from that table up to this dais, I thought Raymond was the strongest interview candidate tonight. He was very passionate with his answers, and I thought he had great answers to the questions. And as far as candidates that bring some diversity, I really liked what Jessica Payne has as far as a background, with her real estate background and her CASA background and her mediation background. I think she would be something we haven't seen up here on the dais as long as I've been around.
Thank you. I'm going to add a few comments, and then what I'll do is just look for people to raise their hands to continue the discussion. My guess is with this group that there's likely to be more discussion, and I don't think we need to go round robin in order to accomplish that. You know, I think you do have a lot of experience in your applicant pool tonight. To me, there was the strong standouts on experience were really 4 of the 6. They've all, of course, been mentioned, but Scott Cunningham, Raymond Reimer, Mark Davis, and Jessica Payne all have a lot of experience to bring to the table. I do think that there's an importance knowing that, we are appointing for an interim position, and although the council might be hopeful that applicant will run and they may have a leg up from being appointed in the position, that of course there's no guarantee, and so we do also need to be thinking about this on both fields, both who is the council going to appoint that can do a good job over a relatively short period of time, and then acknowledging that you're setting that person up potentially for easier success in the fall against any competitor. The other thing is that I do want to point out, specific to the conversation regarding Mark Davis, is that Mr. Davis has probably more influence over the council than just about any other general citizen of Mcminnville in the format in which we currently operate. And that's not a commentary in a negative or a positive light. I think hearing the council kind of generally acknowledge that his input as an individual citizen is important in that decision-making process really only underscores the point that it's as close to factual as kind of be in an observation. And so I encourage you to think about that and think about how that plays out when you do have one person that has that type of influence. I personally would be concerned appointing somebody that had very little experience. I just feel like the period of time that we have for the seat, joining council is a learning curve no matter what. Making it an exceptionally steep learning curve, if we're looking at people's experience, I think is dangerous for us at this point in time, knowing the work that we have coming before us. I would love to hear more counselors. I think I am concerned that our last applicants, because of the way that things played out with the timing and then coming in late and being rushed, I just want to make sure that applicant gets the same consideration, even though there was a little different, even though the process got interrupted a little bit. I don't want it to be separate and apart. And I say that only because I didn't hear her name come up that much, which was maybe just because of how the council felt she interviewed or her background was, but it felt like she had a lot of relevant experience that I didn't hear come up yet in deliberations, and I want to make sure that it's considered as well. And so with those thoughts, if we could just do a raise of the hand, and we'll just go around. Councillor Chenoweth, thank you.
So after listening to all the different comments, and even what you just had to say, I did mention Jessica as one of my top three.
I think there were at least three of us that mentioned her.
Yeah, and after I said that and after I got to thinking about it, we're in this day and age, diversity, and it seems to be an issue that is brought up regularly. I don't want to hammer that point, but I think she fits that bar. Her background, as Adam put out, is she's got a really good background of experience that we have not had here on the council in the time that I've been watching it, and then the short time that I've sat on it. I'm really firm in my position that I really do not want to see us lose a good critic. And I appreciate the passion and the argument that, Sal, you made, but I don't want to lose that critic from off the floor. So I would not want to go that direction. And I feel like, I think of the three that I picked, going off Zach's comment about wanting to plug a hole that we don't already have, I would agree that with Adam, that Cunningham is more of the same. And even to some degree, Ray may be more of the same. Raymond may be more of the same of what we have. He's a business owner in the community. So in that vein of the three that I picked, I'm thinking maybe more Jessica might be a better fit for the different criteria that has been mentioned here.
Other counselors?
I like Jessica. I thought she did a very good interview, actually, out of the circumstances. She does seem to have quite a bit of board experience, and that, I think, will go a long way.
Sal, did you have additional thoughts you wanted to share?
No, I mean, I'm really not persuaded by the argument that, because somebody's good because someone's really good at actually being critical of our organization, that is somehow, that they're more of a benefit not at this table. I just don't follow that line of thinking. I realize that you can say more things not being on the dais than you can being up here, but I also think that it's important to have, the most experienced, most qualified applicant, which I think in this case,
Sal, I can't hear you.
Based on what we're looking for, in my opinion anyway, someone to come in and fill a role that knows the role of the job, the limitations of the job, that's able to come in and hit the ground running immediately. I just think there's a big difference between Mark and the rest of the candidates, and I just don't think that we benefit from having him not up here at the dais. And that's not to be critical. And by the way, I do think Jessica was a strong candidate. I think all of the candidates that we had tonight were strong candidates. But I just feel that we have a lot of big decisions this year. It's a watershed year for Oregon government, and I think we need the person who is the most experienced up here with us making decisions.
Thank you. Council President or Councilor Gary, do you want to add?
I guess I would like, if there's desire to kind of whittle this down to, two candidates, and we could go into more in-depth discussion around those two, would be of interest to me. It sounds like we're getting there, but I don't know. I would like to see us put somebody up here via the appointment process that is different than the skill sets we already have up here. We have a very diverse council, and I think if we can make it more diverse, only good policy is going to come from that.
So,
to Adam's point, I have felt like the biggest thing that we have lacked is expertise in affordable housing. That's what we lack. That, to me, as a city, that's been our biggest lack. That's why I asked Mark to join the Affordable Housing Task Force. And that's his core. And we have a need right now with someone with expertise in land use and those kinds of things. Anyway,
well, I don't
made
think
my point. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, well, and I do, Councilor Peralta, you're correct. If we're looking only at experience, there's no doubt that Mr. Davis is the most experienced candidate we have specific to the happenings of the Mcminnville city government. His learning curve would be relatively low comparatively. We do have Claudia did prepare paper ballots if the council would like to rank in terms of getting closer to seeing kind of where the consensus is on those top couple candidates. It doesn't mean that ballot needs to be conclusive. We can rank those and then kind of get down to the last two candidates and see if we want to look for an applicant out after that ranking. We're kind of there, but I see you're keeping more of a little score. Do you have, but I mean, we still have a couple names up at the top, but how does the council want to move forward? Is that, would you all like to do the ranking on the paper ballots, or would you like to just continue deliberations? I'm open to either.
Well, what I've heard right now is it sounds like we have several that are interested in discussing Jessica Payne. We have one that's interested in discussing.
Zach's down for Richard and Tynan and Scott. As far as
His top was Richard.
As far as who's leading the pack right now of nods from fellow counselors, you have Jessica, Raymond, and Scott have the most amount of nods, I guess, from the deliberations so far.
Yeah, but I'm looking at who, kind of they saying what their top one was. It kind of sounded to me like he was more Smith.
I don't have a runaway favorite.
Okay. Okay. Well, then I'm sorry. I'm not trying to talk for you. I apologize. Maybe we need to do the paper ballot. I was
Yeah,
thinking we were.
well, why don't we just do it and simplify, and then we can see where we are on our top two, and it's a little bit more conclusive. Thank you.
Please be sure to identify your name on your ballot, since every vote must be public.
And just as a point of order, we're only putting down 2 names.
No, all 6.
You can,
Yeah.
your ballots have all 6 names on them? How did you create the ballots? They just have one?
Yeah, you can just write, are we doing more than one or just?
If the council wants to show a preference type vote, it can rank, if you can choose one, your first 2 or your first 3, that's a choice you can make, and then you can collate those. Ultimately, you're going to have to choose one by a vote of a majority of the council.
Yes.
Should we just put our top 2 then?
Yeah, let's just do our top 2 and go from there.
I think just top 2.
Claudia, I emailed you my top 3. Just look at the top 2.
Thank you.
Going rogue, Maverick.
Okay.
I vote?
How do they?
It's okay.
Trade you.
If we wanted it to be a secret ballot.
Plus, they can't.
Actually, I'm going to send you a different one. I'm sorry, I think I goofed up.
Yeah, right. That's how to get in trouble.
You don't have to fold it.
Habit from elementary school.
You do a special twist and put it in the top to win.
And then I've heard that if you lick it, they're more likely to pull it out of the box.
Yeah.
You're going to be the one that's drawn. I have 3 sandwiches.
Whoever gets 3 votes is it. Somebody abstains.
Kelly, what are you doing down in Carlsbad? Visiting your daughter?
Yeah, I got here about 2 weeks ago, and we moved her in. I got there at to know, right?
That's quite the mother hen.
And I coming from Barcelona.
Well, these are just, this is, yeah.
No, because we all got to vote for 2. So.
Yeah.
So you gave equal weight to first or second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so your top applicants are Scott Cunningham and Jessica Payne. Council. Do you want to have some continued deliberations, or would somebody like to move us to make a motion? Do one more call for deliberations, if anybody'd like to have some additional thoughts for the council to hear before moving forward.
I would just encourage counselors, if we're debating on these 2 candidates, to look at the perspective they're going to bring for our policy between now and the end of the year. I think either one of them are fully capable of handling the learning curve of the appointment. So for me, that's a moot point. Scott's been more active in the downtown sector and Visit Mcminnville and MDA and things like that, but I know Jessica's been very active in the community and she's a quick read. So I think either one of them could definitely hit the ground running and provide valuable insight to the council. And for myself, Jessica brings more diversity to this dais, and so that's where my vote would land.
Other councilors?
I make a motion that we consider Jessica Payne for our candidate for City Council for Ward 3.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to take one moment before I entertain that motion, just because we did had some unmicrophoned dialogue down on the dais and that I'd like to hear before we move into a motion, just to make sure all the councilors had a chance to.
Fine with me.
Right. Councilor Gary?
I just asked if there was any merit to a paper ballot runoff now that we've whittled it down. I mean, but if there's a motion and a second and there's votes, then that is more than a paper ballot runoff. So
I feel the council's able to move. Okay, Councilor Menke, you wanted to make a motion?
Yes, I move that Jessica Payne be considered for the Ward 3 councilor replacement.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Menke and a second from Council President Garvin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is it a roll call vote? It doesn't tell me I need to do.
It can be a roll call vote if requested. Yeah, sure.
Would you like to request it? Sure. Okay, great. Claudia, will you poll the council, please?
Counselor Geary,
aye.
Counselor Menke,
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth,
Aye.
Counselor Peralta,
Aye.
Council President Garvin.
Aye.
Thank you. And so the motion passes unanimously with 5 votes in favor.
And it's not 9 o'clock. Unbelievable.
Walt, I kept notes on the interview in here. Do you want this back? Or is that
Hold
part
on,
of anything?
yeah, we do need to turn them back to
Okay.
Claudia at the end. I will now adjourn the special meeting of the McMinnville City Council at 8:55 PM.